In a forgotten latitude where time unspools like silk from a sleeping weaver's spindle, there exists a hidden basin known as the caldera of the quiet pulse. Here, the sun and moon share the sky in a perpetual, gentle truce, casting a light that is neither day nor night, but a soothing, pearlescent gloaming. The air is still and cool, carrying the faint, clean scent of ozone and stone that has never known the tread of a hurried foot. Sound here is absorbed into a profound acoustical velvet, leaving only the rhythmic, subaudible hum of the planet's own deep dreaming. At the basin's heart lies a circular lake, so perfectly still it appears to be a disk of polished obsidian laid upon the earth. This is the mirror of effortless return, and on its shore rests a simple, open pavilion with no walls, only a roof of living moss and a floor of smooth, warmed river stones. Here dwells a figure known as the keeper of the unspoken rhythm. Her age is not in years, but in the slow, graceful erosion of a mountain into a soft hill. With her is a young acolyte named Silas, whose mind was a library where every book had fallen open to a frightening passage, all at once. "Keeper," Silas murmured, his voice barely disturbing the thick silence. "My consciousness is a river in flood, churning, muddy, tearing at its own banks. I close my eyes and am swept away by currents of memory and dread. How do I find the lake's stillness? Even the water striders here move with more calm purpose than I can muster." The keeper was engaged in a ritual of exquisite slowness. She held a single, perfect cherry blossom in the palm of her left hand. With her right index finger, she was tracing, with infinite patience, the contour of a single petal. She did not look up, but her attention deepened, creating a pool of quiet around them. "Silas," her voice was the sound of sand settling through an hourglass, granular and soft. "You are trying to dam the river. You must instead become its deepest, widest bed. The river's power is not its turbulence, but its eventual surrender to the sea. Rest is not the absence of flow. It is the profound depth that allows all flow to pass over it, untouched. Tonight, do not listen for a tale of heroes or quests. Listen for the tale of the water itself. Be the cup that holds it, not the hand that grasps." He sank onto a bed of dried river grass and fragrant cedar boughs. A large, placid carp, its scales the color of tarnished gold and twilight, swam to the shallows and rested just below the surface, its gills moving in a slow, metronomic pulse. The keeper's voice began, not as a narration, but as a deepening of the existing quiet, a whisper woven into the fabric of the gloaming. Part 1. The snow atop the mountain. High above the caldera, in the realm of eternal winter, lay a field of perfect snow on the shoulder of a nameless peak. This snow was not yet water. It was crystalline potential, each flake a unique, intricate expression of frozen stillness. It knew nothing of rivers or lakes. Its identity was snow on the mountain, and its existence was one of radiant cold and brilliant silence. It reflected the stars and held the mountain's shape. For millennia, it was content. Then a change so subtle it was more a feeling than an event, a softening, not a melting, but a yielding at the molecular level. A single, foundational crystal released its grip. This was not a failure, but a remembering, a memory of liquidity, of connection, of flow. With this first release, a droplet was born, a bead of perfect clarity. Part 2. The becoming of the brook. The droplet joined others. They were no longer individual flakes, but a collective seepage. They became a trickle, then a rivulet, then a chattering brook carving a tiny course down a granite face. This was the birth of Avalanche Brook. It had a name now, and a purpose: to descend. It was joyous in its movement, exuberant in its sound. It defined itself by its action. I am the one who falls. I am the one who cuts. I am the one who sings. As it descended, it gathered things. It gathered mineral taste from the rock: iron, quartz, limestone. It gathered fragments of other identities: a pine needle from a high cliff, a fleck of mica, the scent of a mountain flower it rushed past. It began to think, I am mineral tasting. I am pine scented. I am fast and clear. Its identity grew more complex, more burdened with attributes. The pure, silent potential of the snowfield was a fading dream. Part 3. The turbulence of the river. The brook joined other streams. It became a river, the churning sealer, named for a forgotten word for troubled spirit. Now its movement was not just joyous, but powerful and fraught. It encountered boulders, obstacles of circumstance, and crashed against them in sprays of white fury, anger. It plunged into dark, narrow canyons, fear. It slowed in wide, sun-warmed shallows, contentment, only to be pulled back into the rapids of change, anxiety. The river was entirely identified with its own drama. I am the one who fights the boulder. I am the one trapped in the canyon. I am the one who fears the next waterfall. It carried a thick load of silt, the accumulated grit of its journey, its past. Its waters were no longer clear. They were muddy with experience. It longed for clarity, for peace, but saw only the relentless, twisting channel of its own narrative ahead. Part 4. The delta of letting go. The land began to level. The river's slope gentled. Its currents, once so fierce and distinct, began to slow and intertwine. It entered a vast, flat plain, the delta of release. Here something strange began to happen. The main channel, the strong sense of I am the river sealer, began to falter. It could no longer maintain its singular, forceful identity. It began to braid. One strand flowed left, another right. It split into 100 distributaries, each carrying a portion of the water, a portion of the silt. The heavy load of past began to settle out. The silt, the specific memories of that particular boulder, the exact taste of that canyon's gloom, sank to the bottom, becoming simply soil. The water began to clear. The river was no longer a single striving I. It was becoming a network, a web of interconnected flows. The boundaries between main channel and side channel blurred. It was a dissipation of selfhood. It was not a death, but an expansion into a quieter, less centralized way of being. Part 5. The merging with the sea. The countless braids of the delta finally met the vast, waiting embrace of the sea. There was no dramatic crash, no final defining moment. There was only a gradual, seamless mingling. Salt water and fresh water embraced. The last remnants of river identity, the particular mineral taste, the final memory of mountain cold, dissolved into the immense, saline unity. The sea was not other. It was the river's own original nature remembered. The sea had no name, no narrative, no direction. It was boundless, deep, and profoundly still at its heart. It contained all rivers, all rains, all clouds, all snowfields. It held them without preference, without judgment. In this boundless stillness, the frantic journey of the snowflake-turned river was seen for what it was. A beautiful, temporary play of form within the formless. The struggle, the joy, the fear, the silt, all were held, accepted, and loved into stillness. The sea did nothing. It simply was. And in its deep, silent being, The moon's pull would eventually draw vapor up to form clouds, to fall again as snow on a distant peak. The cycle was endless, but the sea felt no urgency. It was the beginning, the middle, and the end all at once, eternally at rest. The keeper's finger had completed its infinitely slow journey around the petal. She lowered her hand. The story was told. Silas's breathing had become indistinguishable from the gentle lap of water against the shore. The library in his mind was still. Each book was closed, shelved, and at peace. The golden carp drifted in a slow circle, a living mandala in the dark water. Her final words were not spoken to the air, but to the silence itself, a gift laid upon its altar. So rest, Silas. You are not the churning, muddy river fighting its banks. You are the deep, salt sea that has always awaited it. You are not the single, frantic channel. You are the boundless delta, allowing the self to spread and soften until it is indistinguishable from the whole. Let each thought be a flake of snow. Let it melt. Let each worry be a tumbling stone. Let it settle. Let each memory be a swirl of silt. Let it fall away to become fertile ground. There is no journey to complete, no identity to defend. You have already arrived at the sea. Your only task is to realize it, to feel the vast, quiet depth of your own being that knows no turbulence, only a gentle, eternal tide of awareness, rising and falling in the great dark cradle of no-thing. In the caldera of the quiet pulse, the pearlescent light held steady. The mirror of effortless return showed only the soft, reflected glow of the sky. In the open pavilion, the keeper sat as still as the mountain that had borne the first snow, and on his bed of grass and cedar, Silas slept the sleep of the sea, a vast, quiet, boundless rest. It was no longer a river seeking its end. He had become the endlessness itself, and in that boundless depth, every drop of his being was finally, peacefully, home. In a latitude beyond maps, where the sky forgets its own color and simply hangs as a soft, dove-grey bell, there exists a hollow known as the Dean of the unremembered moment. Here, the atmosphere has the density of a held breath, rich with the scent of loam and myrrh. Time is not linear, but radial, pulsing outwards and inwards, like the slow heartbeat of a sleeping world. The silence is a living thing, deep and velvety, through which one can hear the resonant hum of space, like the sound of a struck crystal bowl just after the mallet has been lifted. In this hollow grows a garden, but not of arranged flowers or pruned trees. It is the grove of the untended fruit. Plants rise, bloom, and return to earth in a cycle as natural and unhurried as a sigh. At its center is a simple, circular bench of petrified wood, smoothed by centuries of soft robes and soft thoughts. Here resides the guardian of the unforced bloom, an elder whose face is a tapestry of gentle folds, each one holding the memory of a compassionate smile. With her is an apprentice named Lynn, whose mind was a sky full of distant thunder, no immediate storm, but a constant, low rumble of something about to happen. "Guardian," Lynn whispered, as the eternal grey light seemed to thicken toward evening's repose. "My awareness is a field after a wildfire, charred, exposed, with the ghosts of 1,000 lost things rising as smoke. I seek the cool green of rest, but find only the smouldering memory of the day. How do I find the deep, fertile darkness of the soil here? Even the fallen leaves seem to decompose into sleep more gracefully than I." The guardian was not tending, but witnessing. She held a single, perfectly ripe fig in her open palm, neither weighing it nor judging it. Her gaze was soft, resting upon it as one might rest upon a familiar horizon. "Lynn." Her voice was the sound of charcoal sketching a circle on slate, soft, definitive, and gentle. "You are trying to replant the burnt field from memory. You must instead allow the rain to fall upon the ash. The soil does not need to be told how to be fertile. It only needs to be left alone. Rest is not a cultivated state. It is the state of things when interference ceases. Tonight, do not listen for a lesson. Listen for the spaces where the lesson would be. Let them fill with silence." He settled upon a bed of dried moss and cool, fragrant ferns. A large, dark hare with eyes like pools of obsidian hopped close and curled into a soft, breathing mound against his side. The guardian's voice began, not as a stream of words, but as a series of quiet tones, each one inviting a deeper layer of stillness. Part 1. The empty pot. Before seed, before soil, before the idea of growth, there was a pot. It was not clay, but a vessel spun from intention, a vessel of pure potential. It was round-bellied and wide-mouthed, glazed in the color of the pre-dawn sky. It sat in a space of perfect emptiness, holding nothing but its own capacity to hold. For an eternity, the pot simply was. It did not yearn to be filled. Its perfection was its emptiness. It was complete. This was the state of shunyata, not a barren void, but a fertile, pregnant emptiness, the mother of all possibilities. It was the mind before the first thought, the heart before the first clinging. Part 1 and 2. The gift of the first seed. Then, from a place beyond place, a single seed was offered. It was not planted, it was gifted. A small, hard, golden brown node of potential life. It rested at the bottom of the empty pot. The pot, feeling the weight, experienced a subtle shift. A whisper of identity stirred. I am the holder of the seed. Its perfect emptiness was now defined by a relationship. With the seed came a faint, imagined scent of future blossoms, a phantom memory of future shade. The pot began, ever so slightly, to anticipate. It began to think of itself as a gardening pot, a useful pot. The pure, silent joy of being an empty vessel began to fade beneath the gentle tyranny of potential. Part 3. The agony of cultivation. The seed, responding to some silent law, began to stir. A tiny white root quested downward, a pale, seeking tongue. A green shoot, furled tight as a secret, pushed upward toward the imagined light. And now, the pot's world became one of intense participation. The gardener, the mind, the self, arrived. Ah, it thought, growth. I must help. It began to pour the water of anxious attention upon the seedling. It positioned the pot in the exact spot of imagined perfect light. It fretted over the color of the leaves, the straightness of the stem. It whispered words of encouragement and fear. Grow, but not too fast. Be strong. Don't wilt. The seedling, feeling this intense focus, grew, but its growth became strained. The stem was rigid. The leaves, while green, had a tight, nervous energy. The pot was now entirely identified with its contents. I am a pot with a healthy plant, it thought with pride. Or, I am a pot with a struggling plant, it thought with fear. Its own clay nature, its own beautiful, empty form, was forgotten. Its worth was tied to the success or failure of the life within it. It lived in a state of perpetual, subtle anxiety. Part 4. The neglect that was love then. The gardener grew weary, not from malice, but from the exhaustion of constant interference. One day, the gardener simply forgot. The water was not poured. The pot was not moved. The anxious whispers ceased. At first, the pot felt a terrifying abandonment. I'm alone. The plant will die. I have failed. The plant, too, felt the withdrawal of frantic energy. It trembled. But then, a slower, older rhythm began to reassert itself. The morning dew, which the gardener's watering can had always washed away, now settled on the leaves like a blessing of diamonds. The sun found the plant in its own time, moving across the sky in a dance the gardener could never have choreographed. The wind, once seen as a threat, now strengthened the stem with its gentle, persistent pressure. The plant, freed from the burden of expectation, began to grow in a new way, not taller, but deeper. Its roots explored the confines of the pot, not as a prison, but as a home, finding nutrients in the slow breakdown of the clay itself. Its leaves unfurled with a relaxed, generous grace. It was no longer a project. It was simply a life, interacting with the elements. The pot, in turn, began to remember itself. It felt the coolness of the dew, the warmth of the sun, not as things happening to its charge, but as sensations upon its own clay body. It remembered the joy of simply being a vessel, a space for things to happen, not a director of events. The boundary between pot and plant began to soften. They were two aspects of a single, symbiotic being, the container and the contained, in a peaceful, wordless dialogue. Part 5. The cracking and the wildflower seasons turned in the world outside the Dean. One winter, a deep, quiet frost settled. Water in the soil expanded. With a sound as soft as a thought releasing, a single hairline crack appeared in the pot's side. It was not a break, but an opening. In the spring, a tiny, tenacious wildflower seed, carried on a cloak of dust from a forgotten meadow, found its way through the crack. It settled in the moist, fertile space between the pot's outer wall and the earth. Unseen, unplanned, unforced, it grew. It was not the prized plant of the gardener's ambition. It was a small, blue, anonymous bloom. Its roots gently embraced the crack, not exploiting it, but sealing it with a living embrace. The pot now held two lives, the original, stately plant within, and the humble, wild flower without. It made no distinction. It held them both. The crack, once a flaw, was now a bridge, a connection to the wider, untended world. The pot was no longer a separate object in a void. It was part of the garden, the earth, the cycle. Its identity had dissolved into relationship. It was no longer a pot for something. It was simply here, participating in the effortless, unplanned flourishing of existence. The guardian's hand had not moved. The fig rested, a small dark sun in her palm. The story had been poured into the silence like water into sand, disappearing but nourishing the deep ground. Lynn's body was heavy, completely surrendered to the support of the earth. The distant thunder in his mind had faded, leaving only the clear, open sky after a storm has passed, washed and quiet. The dark hair slept, a soft, warm weight of pure being. Her final words were not sentences, but the verbal equivalent of a hand smoothing a rumpled sheet. So rest, Lynn. You are not the anxious gardener, nor the straining plant. You are the original empty pot, perfectly whole in your capacity to simply be. You are not the field scorched by thought. You are the deep, dark, patient soil beneath it, already fertile, already dreaming of green. Let each memory be a seed, and leave it unwatered. Let each worry be a frost, and trust it will create its own necessary crack. There is nothing to grow, nothing to achieve. The wildflower of peace has already taken root in the fissures of your striving. Your only task is to cease interfering, to become the circular bench, the watching grove, the empty, welcoming vessel the gardener has left. the tools are still. All that remains is the natural, unhurried, unforced bloom of this very moment, as it is and as it is not, in the tender holding of no hands at all. In the dean of the unremembered moment, in the grove of the untended fruit, the grey light deepened into a soft, velvety black, pricked by the first shy stars. The guardian sat, a still point in the turning world, and on his bed of moss, Lynn slept the sleep of the empty pot, a deep, receptive, and profoundly peaceful rest. He was no longer a cultivator of experience, but the spaciousness in which all experience naturally arose and fell away, wild and beautiful and utterly free. The fire had passed, the ash had cooled, and in the rich, dark silence, a million unseen seeds of peace gently stirred, needing nothing from him at all. In a fold of reality where geography yields to metaphysics, there exists a chasm known as the rift of perpetual almost. It is not a void, but a space brimming with potential form, like clay awaiting the potter's first touch. The air here hums with a low, resonant frequency, the foundational note of Aum drawn out into eternity. Light exists as a liquid, silver mist, obscuring far shores and making the near seem infinitely deep. Spanning this chasm is a structure of impossible grace, the bridge of the uncrossed crossing. It is woven not of stone or rope, but of solidified moonlight and the memory of birdsong. It has no beginning post and no end pier. Both sides dissolve into the mist. Upon the exact center of this bridge sits a pavilion of woven reeds, and in it resides the keeper of the middle way. His age is measured in the slow lengthening of shadows, and his eyes hold the still clarity of a mountain tarn at dawn. With him rests a pilgrim named Ilara, whose mind was a marketplace at the height of trade, a cacophony of transactions, debts, and clamoring voices. "Keeper," Ilara breathed, the words seeming to hang in the thick air before dissolving. "My consciousness is a bridge under impossible strain. I feel pulled taut between past and future, duty and desire, each footfall an agony of choice. How do I find the stability of the deep canyon walls? Even the mist seems to rest more securely than I." The keeper was performing a ritual of exquisite balance. On the tip of his outstretched finger rested a single, perfect feather, grey as the mist. He did not hold it still. He allowed it to tremble with the faintest breath, his own micro-movements counterbalancing its dance to maintain a dynamic, living equilibrium. "Ilara." His voice was the sound of a single drop of water falling into a perfect pool, clean, singular, resonant. "You are trying to freeze the bridge into stone, but a bridge, by its nature, is a verb. It is the act of connecting, not the object of connection. Your strain comes from believing you are the solid planks, rather than the space between them that allows the crossing. Rest is not the absence of tension. It is the perfect balance of all tensions, so finely tuned it feels like stillness. Tonight, do not listen for a path from here to there. Listen for the point that is neither here nor there, and yet is both." She lay upon a mat of woven river grass, the subtle, living sway of the bridge beneath her like a gentle rocking. A great silent owl with plumage the colour of tarnished clock gears alighted on the pavilion's edge, its eyes glowing like smoothed amber. The keeper's voice began, not as a line, but as a circle, a story that started and ended in the same breath. Part 1. The two shores. Long before the bridge was a dream, there existed two shores. The shore of yesterday, a land of fixed forms, of carved statues and written scrolls, where every tree was named and every path was etched deep by familiar feet. Its soil was rich with memory, but also heavy with the compost of regret. The air there was thick with the perfume of known flowers and the faint, persistent smoke of burned-out fires. And there was the shore of tomorrow, a land of swirling mist and phantom shapes, of dazzling potential and terrifying uncertainty. Here, towers of cloud promised glorious palaces, and shadows in the fog hinted at lurking beasts. It was a symphony of pure possibility, beautiful and anxiety-inducing in equal measure, vibrating with the chords of what if and if only. Between them roared the river of becoming. It was not water, but the ceaseless, fluid current of present moment experience, a torrent of sensation, thought and feeling. It had no name, for to name it would be to try to hold it. Part 2. The birth of the builder. On the shore of yesterday, a being grew weary. She was called Anya, the planner. She looked across the raging, nameless river to the shimmering, elusive shore of tomorrow and felt a deep longing. There, she thought, lies peace, success, enlightenment, love. I must get there. So with the materials of yesterday, the hard woods of memory, the strong ropes of habit, the nails of determination, she began to build. She constructed a pier that jutted bravely into the torrent. She called it My Plan. From the shore of tomorrow, a being also stirred. He was called Kale, the dreamer. He looked back at the solid, defined shore of yesterday and felt a deep nostalgia. There, he sighed, lies safety, understanding, home, truth. I must return there. So with the substances of tomorrow, the resilient alloys of hope, the flexible cables of aspiration, the glue of faith, he began to build. He constructed a pier reaching back across the chaos. He called it My Goal. Part 3. The illusion of the span. For lifetimes measured in heartbeats, Anya the planner built out. Her pier was sturdy, logical, and well-crafted. Kyle the dreamer built back. His pier was beautiful, inspired, and full of promise. They built with such fervent belief in their separate destinations that they did not see the truth taking shape beneath them. Their piers did not reach opposite shores. Instead, driven by the hidden current of a shared, deeper longing, not for a shore but for an end to longing, their constructions met. Not in the middle of the river, but in a space that was of the river yet distinct from it. The planks of memory and the cables of hope intertwined. The nail of determination was secured by the glue of faith. They had not built to something. They had built from something. And what they had created was not a path to the other side, but a platform above the flow. They stood upon their meeting point, each believing they were one step from the other shore, yet neither took the final step, for that would mean abandoning the structure that defined them. Part 4. The platform becomes the keeper. Anya and Kyle, standing on their joint creation, slowly forgot they were builder and dreamer. The platform needed maintenance. They became its caretakers. They oiled the planks of memory, lest they warp. They tightened the cables of hope, lest they sag. They guarded against the corrosive spray of doubt. Their identities merged into the structure. They became the keepers of the bridge. But a bridge that goes nowhere is a strain to uphold. They felt the terrible tension of being anchored to two different worlds, pulled by the gravity of yesterday and the magnetism of tomorrow. The platform groaned with the burden of their divided attention. They were exhausted, forever shoring up against the relentless current of now that flowed, disregarded beneath them. Part 5. The realization and the dissolution. One day, a great heron of perfect equanimity landed on their railing. It did not look to yesterday or tomorrow. It gazed directly down into the roaring, nameless river below. "What do you see?" asked the weary keepers in unison. "I see the water," said the heron. "But what is on the other side?" they pressed. The heron blinked slowly. "There is no other side. There is only the river and the reflection of the sky in it. Your bridge is not spanning it. It is a dam across it. You are not connecting shores. You are blocking the flow." With these words, a profound understanding washed over them. They looked down. For the first time, they did not see a dangerous torrent to be spanned, but a magnificent living reality, the river of present experience of samsara itself, which was not an obstacle to nirvana, but its very substance when seen clearly. Together, they took a breath that was also a release. They ceased their maintenance. They stopped trying to be a bridge to somewhere. And a miracle occurred. The nails of determination without the anxious force holding them relaxed. The ropes of habit without tension loosened. The planks of memory and the cables of hope, no longer bound to the impossible task of reaching a shore, began to untangle. They did not collapse into the river. They softened, unfolded, and were taken by the current. The builders, the keepers, felt their own solid identities soften with the structure. They were not falling. They were flowing. The distinction between Anya and Kale dissolved. The separation between bridge and river dissolved. The platform became flotsam, then sediment, then simply part of the river's bed. What was left was not a crossing, but the river itself, wider and deeper for having absorbed the attempt to constrain it. And in the very center of where the bridge once stood, the current was profoundly calm, a deep, still pool of perfect awareness. It was the middle way, not a narrow path between extremes, but the boundless, flowing center that holds all extremes within it. The keeper's finger was still, the feather balanced in a moment of eternal poise. The story was complete, a closed loop of understanding. Ilara's breath had synchronized with the slow, deep pulse of the chasm below. The marketplace in her mind was empty, the stalls closed, the square silent and swept clean. The great owl closed its eyes, becoming a soft sculpture of repose. His final words were the verbal equivalent of that balanced feather, hovering in the listening air. So rest, Ilara. You are not the straining bridge. You are the wide, deep river flowing beneath it. You are not the planner on the shore of yesterday, nor the dreamer on the shore of tomorrow. You are the still pool of awareness in the eternal present that holds the memory of both. Let each tension be a plank, and let it soften. Let each choice be a cable, and let it unwind. There is no crossing to complete, no other shore to reach. You are already home, in the flowing center of things. The builder has laid down her tools. The keeper has left his post. All that remains is the river and the sky, perfectly reflected in its calm, clear depth. The journey is over. The path is the ground beneath you. Be the water, not the bridge. In the rift of perpetual almost, the silver mist gently swirled. The bridge of the uncrossed crossing, if one looked with old eyes, was no longer there. Or perhaps it was everywhere. In the pavilion of reeds, the keeper sat, an embodiment of the middle way. And on her mat, Ilara slept the sleep of the river, a deep, flowing, endless rest. She was no longer stretched between opposites, but was the very substance in which all opposites arose and dissolved, carried effortlessly toward a sea that was both destination and source, forever and never away. In a realm where cartography yields to phenomenology, There exists a plateau known as the plane of suspended seconds. Here, chronometry dissolves. The sun and moon do not chase each other, but rest side by side in a peach-grey sky. Two great gentle eyes observing an unchanging noon midnight. The air is honey thick with silence, and what sounds exist. The sigh of root through soil, the exhalation of stone as it cools, are so slow they feel like thoughts rather than noises. It is the world seen from the corner of the eye, forever unresolved, perpetually at ease. Upon this plain stands an observatory with no telescope. Its dome is spun from fossilized spider silk and dusk, and it is called the Hall of the Unmeasured Breath. Inside, seated on a floor of warm onyx, resides the Watcher of the Interval. Her face is a landscape of such profound peace it seems to absorb time itself, leaving only presence. By her side is a young scholar named Leo, whose mind was a frenetic clockworks, gears of anxiety grinding against springs of regret, all ticking in a cacophonous, arrhythmic panic. "Watcher," Leo uttered, the words leaving his lips like stones sinking into a fathomless pool. My awareness is a sundial in a hurricane. I am scoured by shadows of what was, blinded by the light of what might be. Where is the eternal shadowless noon? How do I find the stillness of the unmoving gnomon? Even the lichen on the stones here grows with more temporal certainty than I possess. The Watcher held in her lap a simple brass-bound hourglass, but it contained no sand. Instead, within its two glass bulbs, a single, perfect soap bubble drifted, floating with impossible slowness from one chamber to the other, never bursting, never settling. She observed its passage, her gaze a soft cradle. "Leo," her voice was the auditory equivalent of a shadow lengthening, slow, smooth, and cool. "You are trying to repair the clock. You believe the problem is in the mechanism, but the problem is in believing you are the clock. You are the space in which time is perceived. Rest is not the absence of ticks. It is the realization that the ticks are ornaments upon a timeless silence. Tonight, do not listen for a sequence. Listen for the gaps. They are the true story." He reclined upon a deep pallet of carded wool, which smelled of clean animals and dry sunshine. A slow, ancient tortoise, its shell a mosaic of worn jade and topaz, lumbered to his side and became a living, breathing paperweight upon the edge of his blanket. The Watcher's voice began, a low hum that tuned the very air to a lower frequency. Part 1. The uncarved moment. Before the first then or the first soon, there existed the eternal now. It was not a point on a line, but a boundless, depthless field, like a canvas of infinite dimension, primed not with white, but with a luminous potential grey. It held no past to regret, no future to fear. It was pure, undifferentiated experience, prior to the labeling of experience. In Buddhist terms, it was kshana, the indivisible moment, but here, all kshanas were one. It was the mind of a Buddha in samadhi, where observer observed and process of observation are seamlessly united. Within this field, there was perfect equilibrium. Nothing was lacked because nothing was desired. Nothing was threatened because nothing was separate. It was a peace so profound it was not even recognized as peace. It was simply what is. Part 2. The first tremor of before. Then a tremor. Not a sound, but a vibration in the fabric of being. It was the faintest ghost of a comparison. A subtle, almost imperceptible leaning of awareness. It was the thought, not yet formed into words. This is. With that leaning, a phantom line appeared in the boundless field. On one side of the line stood this. On the other side, by implication, stood that which is not this. A duality was conceived. From the unity of the eternal now, a faint echo called the immediate past was born. It was not a real place, but a memory so fresh it still felt like now, yet slightly dimmed. It was the first shadow. The field, which had known only unity, now knew relation. It was a gentle, terrible birth. The peace was not shattered, but it was now remembered as peace, which meant it could, theoretically, be lost. Part 3, the machinery of sequence. The tremor resonated. The phantom line solidified. From the immediate past, the mind, like a diligent but misguided scribe, began to extrapolate. It drew the line backward. If there was a just now, it reasoned, there must have been a before that. And so the concept of a linear past was invented, a tapestry woven from selective memories, emotions clinging to events like lichen to rock, forming a story called me. Simultaneously, looking from this into the emptiness of that which is not this. The mind felt a thrill of possibility mixed with dread. It drew the line forward. If this can change into that, it projected, then there must be a next. Thus, the future was imagined, a land of hopes, fears, plans, and anxieties, all phantoms dancing in a non-existent space. The eternal now was forgotten. In its place stood a frantic, narrow tightrope stretched between two illusions, the unchangeable prison of yesterday and the terrifying abyss of tomorrow. The mind became the tightrope walker, the samsaric acrobat, perpetually off balance, defined by its fear of falling. It built intricate clocks, calendars, schedules, regrets, aspirations, to measure its precarious journey. It gave names to the ticks: my failure, her opinion, their deadline, my hope. Each tick was a grain of anxiety, each tock a grain of longing. Part 4, the sand that was never there. Leo in his life was this acrobat. His clockworks were his achievements and failures, his relationships and solitudes, all passed into a relentless chronology that left him breathless. He lived in the gnawing gap between what was and what should be, a gap he called my life. But in the hall of the unmeasured breath, he was shown the hourglass with no sand, the floating bubble. The watcher spoke of a great insight, not as a sudden explosion, but as a gradual softening. It begins when the acrobat, exhausted, stops for one pure instant to look down, not at the abyss below, but at the tightrope itself. And in that looking, a realization dawns. The tightrope is also an illusion. It is made of the same mental material as the past and future it connects. It is a story of continuity, where there is only a series of fleeting, discrete moments. The bubble in the hourglass drifted, a perfect sphere of now. It touched neither the past bulb nor the future bulb. It existed in the transition, which was the only reality. Seeing this, the frantic measuring ceases. The clocks don't stop ticking. They are seen for what they are. Decorative noises in a timeless room. The acrobat doesn't fall. He realizes he was never on a rope. He was always standing on the solid, boundless ground of the present moment. The past and future are seen as thought forms, clouds drifting in the vast sky of now. They may cast shadows, regret, anxiety, but they cannot harm the sky. Part 5, the observatory of the present. The hall of the unmeasured breath, Leo understood, was not a place to measure stars, but a place to realize one is the sky in which all stars, past memories, future dreams, appear and vanish. The watcher was not waiting for anything. She was abiding in the fullness of the incomplete, perfect moment. The tortoise, a creature that carries its time on its back, slept deeply. The soap bubble completed its silent journey to the other bulb, not as an ending, but as a continuation of its beautiful, transient existence. The watcher's final words were not a crescendo, but a decrescendo into silence, each word a bubble released into the still air. So rest, Leo. You are not the clock. You are the silence between the ticks. You are not the acrobat on the rope of time. You are the wide, solid plane upon which the entire performance is dreamt. Let each thought of before be a cloud, and watch it pass. Let each tremor of next be a bird, and watch it fly. There is no hour to keep, no past to redeem, no future to secure. The sand was always an idea. The hands were always ghosts. Your true nature is the empty hourglass, the clear space that holds the floating, perfect bubble of this single breath. The measurement has ended. The story of time is closed. All that remains is this boundless, depthless, eternal now. And in this now, there is no need for a then. There is only this peace, and it is enough. On the plane of suspended seconds, the twin lights of sun and moon glowed with a steady, milk-white radiance. In the hall of the unmeasured breath, the watcher returned to her contemplation of the bubble's endless, gentle transit. And on his bed of wool, Leo slept the sleep of the uncarved moment, a deep, dreamless, and utterly present rest. The clockworks had dissolved, not into ruin, but into their constituent parts, space and awareness. He was no longer a prisoner of sequence, but the sovereign, silent witness to the beautiful, meaningless dance of shadows and light in the eternal, shadowless noon of his own being. In a dimension where physics bows to phenomenology, there exists a glen named the Hollow of the Hesitant Dawn. Here, light does not travel, but simply arrives, a permanent, gentle diffusion, as if the world is viewed through the finest silk. The air hangs thick with the scent of wet ink on vellum, damp moss, and the faint, clean ozone of a resolved storm. Silence here is not an absence, but a presence, a soft black velvet that absorbs all frantic noise, leaving only the subsonic hum of potential, the sound of a universe holding its breath. Nestled in this hollow is a structure with no true walls, the pavilion of the unplayed note. Its roof is a living canopy of willow, its floor a mosaic of river-smoothed pebbles, worn to softness by eons of bare, unhurried feet. Here dwells the keeper of the pause, an elder whose face is a testament to tranquil erosion, like a cliff face softened by millennia of patient rain. With him rests a seeker named Maya, whose mind was a symphony hall after the audience has left, yet the orchestra remains, each musician practicing a different, dissonant part. "Keeper," Maya whispered, the sound a small, lost thing in the vast quiet. "My consciousness is a loom strung with tangled threads. I try to find the pattern, the beginning or end of the weave, but there is only chaos. Where is the restful blankness of the unwoven cloth? Even the spider in the corner seems to spin her web from a place of deeper knowing than I." The keeper sat before a low table of polished ebony. Upon it rested a single ancient flute of dark bamboo. He was not playing it. His fingers simply hovered over its holes, feeling, it seemed, the shape of the silence it could contain. He did not look up, but his stillness deepened, a well into which her words could drop and find no echo of distress. "Maya." His voice was the sound of a page being turned in a sacred text, a soft, definitive rustle that promised meaning without imposing it. You are trying to conduct the orchestra. You believe harmony lies in controlling each instrument, but the music you seek is in the silence that holds the space between the notes. Rest is not the absence of the players. It is the acceptance that you are the concert hall itself, vast, resonant, and unchanged by whatever music is played within. Tonight, do not listen for a melody, listen for the rests. They are the true composition. She lay upon a pallet of crushed lavender and sun-warmed hay, the scent a gentle narcotic. A great, white moth with wings like flakes of moonstone settled on the back of her hand, its feathery antennae quivering in time with her pulse. The keeper's voice began, a low, resonant tone that seemed to tune the hollow itself to a fundamental frequency of calm. Part 1. The Silent Symphony. Before vibration, before the first disturbance of air, there was the unstruck sound, anahata. It was not a noise, but the potential for all noise, a perfect, spherical silence, dense with unborn music. It was the mind in its primordial state, before the first thought rippled its surface. In this silence, there was no distinction between listener, sound, and source. It was a unified field of pure auditory awareness, a boundless concert hall waiting for no performance, already complete. Within this hall, all possible melodies existed as latent patterns, like veins in marble waiting to be revealed. The sorrowful adagio of loss, the joyous allegro of discovery, the frantic presto of anxiety, they were all there, not as experiences, but as possibilities, held in perfect, weightless equilibrium. There was no need for them to be played, for the silence itself was the most profound music. Part 2. The first breath, the first note. Then a tremor, a subtle catching of awareness, as if the universe briefly forgot it was whole. It was the first faint sense of separation. Here am I, and there is other. This tremor was the breath before the first note. It was tanha, craving, in its most nascent form. The craving for something to happen, for the story to begin. With this breath, a single pure note was blown into the flute of existence. It was the note of I am. The note was beautiful, clear, and terrifying in its loneliness. It hung in the silent hall, and for a moment there was only it. But a note alone defines itself by what it is not. It implies silence before and silence after. And so, from the resonance of I am, echoes began to form. The echo behind it became I was. The imagined echo ahead became I will be. The unstruck sound was fractured into a linear score. Part 3. The Composer of Sorrows. The mind, now identifying as the lone flute, heard these echoes and was enthralled. It mistook itself for the composer. This is my song, it thought. It began to craft melodies from the echoes. It wove the memory of a gentle rain, a minor third of comfort, with the fear of a coming storm, a dissonant tritone, and called the piece my vulnerability. It took the bright chord of a success and followed it with a diminishing seventh of a forgotten complement, naming the movement my insignificance. The symphony of Maya grew complex, a cacophony of leitmotifs, the rumbling bass line of ancestral worry, the staccato strings of daily irritations, the sad, slow woodwind of nostalgia. She, as the imagined composer-conductor, lived in a state of exhausted frenzy, trying to force the themes into a harmonious resolution that never came. She was lost in the composition, believing the music of her thoughts was the totality of the whole. The original, unifying silence was a forgotten rumor. Part 4. The flute forgets, it is played. The flute, Maya, grew weary. The breath to sustain its note felt strained. The compositions grew repetitive. variations on themes of lack and fear. In a moment of profound fatigue, the effort to blow simply ceased. The note faded. For a terrifying, glorious instant, there was only the echo of its absence. The composer was silent. The orchestra, deprived of its frantic conductor, faltered. The instruments did not vanish. They simply rested, their music unresolved. In that silence, something remembered. The flute, sitting in the sudden quiet, felt the air around it. It felt the shape of its own hollow body. It remembered it was bamboo, a plant that grew by the river, kissed by sun and rain. It remembered it was not the origin of the music, but its vessel. The music was not its. It was a collaboration between the breath of life, prana, and the instrument of form, the body-mind. This was the great turning, paravriti. Not an effort, but a relaxation into truth. The seeker stopped seeking to control the melody and instead began to listen to the source of the breath. Part 5. The pavilion of the unplayed note. The keeper in the pavilion, his fingers over the flute, was not preventing music. He was in a state of deep shikantaza, just sitting. He was aware of the potential for sound, the shape of the melody of Maya's distress, the memory of 1,000 other tunes. But he did not grasp any of them. He held the instrument of his being ready, connected to the breath of the cosmos, but he did not force a song. In this space, the symphony did not end. It transformed. The individual instruments, the thought of a past mistake, a sour oboe note, the worry about tomorrow, a tremolo in the cellos, were still faintly audible, but they were no longer organized into a narrative. They were just sounds arising in the great hall. Without a composer to string them into a story of me, they lost their power. They became like wind chimes stirred by a breeze, random, beautiful, impersonal. The moth on Maya's hand flexed its wings, a silent percussion. The true lullaby was not a sequence of notes, but this rich, layered, ever-present silence, punctuated by the harmless, ephemeral sounds of existence. The unfinished lullaby was the most complete one, for it left space for the listener to dissolve into the silence between the notes. The keeper's hands lowered. The story, like a melody that circles back to its tonic, was complete. Maya's breath had become slow and oceanic. Each inhale a wave of silence, each exhale a release of a clinging musical phrase. The symphony hall of her mind was empty, the musicians having finally laid down their instruments, leaving only the clean, resonant space, ready to acoustically bless any sound that might arise. His final words were the verbal equivalent of a candle being extinguished not by a puff of wind, but by the gentle acceptance of its own wax. So rest, Maya. You are not the frantic composer. You are the silent, spacious hall that has always contained the music. You are not the flute struggling to sustain a solitary note. You are the hollow bamboo, naturally open to the breath of the infinite. Let each thought be a passing note. Hear its timbre, and let it fade into the resonance of the hall. Let each emotion be a short melody. Feel its texture, and let it complete itself without an encore. There is no symphony to finish, no self to express through sound. The lullaby was always singing itself, and you were never separate from its source. The composer has put down her pen. The conductor has lowered his baton. All that remains is the listening, the vast, kind, unplayed listening. And in that listening, there is no need for a song. There is only this silent cradle of awareness, and it is the deepest rest of all. In the hollow of the hesitant dawn, the silken light persisted, a perpetual invitation to rest the eyes. In the pavilion of the unplayed note, the keeper sat, a monument to attentive stillness, and on her bed of lavender, Maya slept the sleep of the unstruck sound, a deep, resonant, and utterly quiet rest. She was no longer a musician in the orchestra of her mind, but the very auditorium of consciousness itself, where all sounds, born of silence, were welcomed and dissolved without a trace, leaving only the perfect, peace-filled, unfinished lullaby of the present, forever unfolding, forever complete. In a province of reality where memory yields to a kind of amnesiac grace, there is a valley known as the Bowl of the Unrecalled Name. It is not shrouded in mist, but in a gentle, pervasive forgetfulness that softens the edges of things. Here the sky is a constant pearly twilight, the color of a dove's breast or the inside of a seashell. The air is cool and tastes of distant snowmelt and forgotten words. The silence is not a void, but a rich hum, the cumulative echo of all the stories ever left untold. At the valley's heart lies a circular lake so still it seems not to be water, but a disk of polished obsidian laid upon the earth. It is the mirror of effortless release. On its shore stands a simple hermitage of woven reeds and river stone. Here lives an elder called the Keeper of the Quiet Letting Go. Her face is a landscape of profound acceptance, each line a riverbed where a torrent of clinging once flowed, now dry and peaceful. With her is a student named Aris, whose mind is a gallery of locked rooms, each holding a shouting portrait of a past self. "Keeper," Aris murmured, the words barely disturbing the surface of the quiet. "My consciousness is a room of slammed doors and frantic echoes. I try to quiet them, to find the empty corridor, but the noise is my own making. How do I find the silence that saturates this lake? Even the reeds seem to hold their peace more deeply than I can hold my breath." The keeper was seated at the water's edge. In her open palm lay a single, smooth, grey pebble. She was not looking at it, but through it, as if it were a window to its own essence. Her stillness was not inert, but a dynamic, open receptivity. "Aris," her voice was the sound of a single drop of water being absorbed into dry earth, soft, final, and deeply quenching. "You are trying to silence the echoes by shouting over them. You must instead become the wide, open plain where the sound can travel until it exhausts itself. The silence you seek is not the absence of noise. It is the boundless space that was here before the first shout, and will remain after the last echo fades. Tonight, do not listen for a tale. Let the tale be the pebble, and your awareness the lake that receives its ripple without resistance." He lay upon a bed of dried sweetgrass and wild thyme, the fragrance an ancient promise of calm. A large, silent carp, the color of tarnished silver, swam to the shallows and rested just beneath the surface, its gills moving in a slow, timeless rhythm. The keeper's voice began, a low, soothing monotone that merged seamlessly with the ambient hum of the valley. Part 1. The Uncarried Stone. In the beginning, before any burden was conceived, there was a plain of flawless, hard-packed earth. Upon it rested a single, ordinary stone. It was smooth from 1,000,000 years of rain, warm from 1,000,000 years of sun. It had no name, no history, no purpose. It did not know it was a stone. It simply was. This was the state of Tathata, suchness, perfect, unadorned being. The stone was one with the plain, and the plain was one with the sky. There was no separation, and therefore no suffering. Part 2. The first grasp. One day, a traveller passed by. He was tired, thirsty, his mind clouded with the dust of a long journey. He saw the stone. A thought, clear and sharp as a knife, arose in his mind. That is a good stone. It is solid. It is mine. He bent and picked it up. The sensation was immediate. The cool weight in his palm, the slight strain in his muscles. This was the birth of the sense of I and mine, ahankara. The stone was no longer just a stone. It was my stone. The traveler was no longer just a being walking. He was the one who carries the stone. At first it felt good. The stone was a comfort, a possession, a point of identity. I am the man with the good stone. He walked on. Part 3. The accumulation of weight. But the plain was long. The sun was hot. The stone grew heavier. Its smoothness, once pleasing, now felt slick with his own sweat. His arm began to ache. A second thought arose, this one heavy and grey. This stone is a burden. But to put it down, that was unthinkable. He had carried it so far. It was his. To release it felt like a failure, a loss of self. So he shifted it to his other hand, then to a pouch on his back. The burden became a part of his posture, a permanent tension in his shoulders. He met other travelers. Some carried flowers, light and fragrant. Others carried gleaming bits of metal. He felt a dull pride in his stone. My burden is heavier, he thought. Therefore I am stronger. His identity became entwined with his suffering. He was the burdened one. Part 4. The blister and the blood. The journey stretched into years. The pouch wore a hole in his cloak, then a sore on his back. The stone's weight carved a permanent ache into his bones. One day, climbing a steep ridge, the strap of his pouch broke. The stone fell, but instinct, born of 1,000 miles of clinging, made him catch it against his chest. It scraped his skin, drawing a thin line of blood. He stood there, on the ridge, holding the bloody stone. The pain was sharp, clean, and in that moment of acute sensation, a window opened in his clouded mind. He looked at the stone, truly looked. He saw not my stone or my burden, but an object, a smooth, grey, indifferent piece of the earth. He saw the blood on it, his blood, and saw the absurdity. The earth does not bleed for a stone returning to it. The grasping, the identifying, the carrying, it was all a story he had been telling himself. The stone had never asked to be carried. The plane had never demanded he lift it. The entire wearying drama was a fabrication of his own mind, a Samsaric narrative of ownership and endurance. Part 5. The unclenching of the hand. The realization did not come with a shout, but with a sigh. A profound, body-deep release of a tension he had forgotten he was holding. He opened his hand. The stone did not crash down. It simply rested in his open palm for one last, weightless moment. Then, with a gentle, almost grateful motion, he lowered his arm and let the stone roll from his hand onto the path. It made a soft thud, not an echo, but a full stop. The relief was not just in his shoulder, but in his mind. The story of the burdened one dissolved. The ache remained for a time, a memory in the flesh, but it was no longer a symbol of his identity. It was just an ache, and it would fade. He looked at his empty hand. It felt strangely light, spacious, capable. He looked at the stone, already gathering a fine coat of dust, returning to its suchness. He was no longer the carrier, nor the burden. He was simply the man on the path, the sky above him, the earth below. The separation had healed. He walked on, and his step was lighter, not because the path was easier, but because he was no longer carrying a world of his own making. The lake receives the ripple. The keeper's hand closed gently around the pebble, absorbing its story. Then, with a motion of infinite slowness, she leaned forward and opened her fingers just above the surface of the obsidian lake. The pebble dropped. Plink. A single perfect ripple expanded outward, a silent circle growing until it touched the far shore and was gone. The sound was the entirety of the story. The grasping, the weight, the ache, the release. And then it was absorbed into the lake's immense, quiet depth. The water did not cling to the ripple. It allowed it its brief, beautiful expression, then returned to stillness. Aris, watching, felt the echo of that plink in his own chest. He felt the clenched rooms of his mind, each holding its own heavy stone. The stone of a past humiliation, the stone of a future fear, the stone of a present inadequacy. One by one, in the deep quiet of the hermitage, he felt his inner hand open, not by force, but by a letting go so natural it was like a leaf detaching in autumn. Thud, thud, thud. Each release was not a loss, but a homecoming, a return of that energy, that identity, to the plane of suchness from which it came. The shouting portraits fell silent, not because they were destroyed, but because the gallery walls had dissolved. They were just paintings now, floating in the open air, harmless and distant. His breathing deepened, becoming one with the slow pulse of the carp in the water. The keeper sat back, her empty hands resting in her lap. Her final words were not a lesson, but a benediction spoken directly to the growing night. So rest, Aris. You are not the burden. You are the open hand. You are not the locked room. You are the key that was never needed, for the door was always an illusion. Let each memory be a stone. Feel its weight, and then gently feel the muscles of your mind. Unclench. Let each worry be a ripple. Watch it spread, and trust the deep water to absorb it. There is nothing to carry, no identity to maintain. The traveler has put down his load. The keeper has dropped the last pebble. All that remains is the lake, vast, clear, and profoundly still. The surface is flawless. The depths are calm. You are not the stone, nor the hand. You are the water. And in that knowing, there is nothing to do but sink into your own endless, peaceful depth. In the bowl of the unrecalled name, the pearly twilight deepened into a soft, starless velvet. The mirror of effortless release showed only the perfect dark reflection of a sky at peace with itself. In the hermitage of reeds, the keeper became a statue of compassionate stillness, and on his bed of sweet grass, Aris slept the sleep of the unclenched hand, a deep, weightless, and utterly unburdened rest. The gallery was empty, the doors were gone, and he was at last simply the open space, cradled in the silent, all-receiving dark. There exists, cradled within the soft folds of a slumbering continent, a place known as the Valley of Unspooled Time. Here, the sun and moon do not rise or set, but hang suspended like two great gentle lanterns in a perpetual state of luminous hesitation. The light is the color of liquid pearl, and the air smells of ozone, petrichor, and the faint, clean scent of snow that has yet to fall. Time here is not a river, but a deep, still pool, and the only sound is the resonant hum of the planet's own dreaming heart, a frequency felt in the bones, not heard by the ears. In this valley rests a mountain, but this is no jagged peak. It is a mountain worn smooth by eons of patient weather, its contours as soft as a resting giant's shoulder. It is named Mendicant's Hush, and within its heart, accessed by a path known only to the lost, lies a cavern called the Sanctuary of the Unlit Lantern. It is not dark, but illuminated by a cool, phosphorescent glow from minerals sleeping in the walls. Here resides an elder known as the Keeper of the Quiet Pulse. Her face is a testament to the erosion of all sharp edges, leaving only the map of a profound and weathered peace. With her is a seeker named Kale, whose mind was a storm of fireflies trapped in a jar, each flicker a thought, a memory, a spark of anxiety, frantic and illuminating nothing. "Keeper," Kale breathed, the words dissolving into the mineral-scented air. "My awareness is a tapestry being woven and unraveled by frantic, unseen hands. I cannot find the still loom. I am made of threads, all pulling in different directions. How do I find the silent unity of this stone? Even the slow drip of water from the ceiling seems to hold more singular purpose than I." The Keeper sat upon a natural dais of amethyst geode. Before her floated, unsupported, a single, perfect soap bubble. It did not drift, but hung in the air, its surface a swirling galaxy of oil-slick colors, reflecting the cavern's gentle light. She observed it not with her eyes, but with her whole being. "Kyle." Her voice was the sound of a stone settling deeper into the riverbed after a flood. A soft, definitive, final sound. "You are trying to catch the fireflies. You believe peace lies in possessing or extinguishing each light, but the peace you seek is the dark space of the jar itself, vast, silent, and untouched by the frantic dance within. The fireflies are not the problem. Your identification with their panic is. Tonight, do not follow a narrative. Let the narrative be the bubble, and your awareness the air that holds it, without pressure, without claim." He lay upon a bed of cool, dried moss that released a faint, sweet scent of forest remembered in dreams. A pale, blind salamander with skin like polished alabaster crawled onto his chest and rested there, a cool, calming weight. The Keeper's voice began, a low, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate from the walls of the cavern itself. Part 1. The Uncarved Block. Before form, before name, before the first whisper of I, there was a single, vast piece of granite at the heart of the unborn world. It was the uncarved block. It held all potential shapes within it: mountain, statue, jewel, hearthstone. But it was none of them. It simply was. It rested in a state of shunyata, not emptiness as lack, but as pure, pregnant potential. It knew no tension, no desire, no story. Its reality was whole, complete, and silent. This was the mind before the first thought, the consciousness prior to separation. Part 2. The sculptor's dream. Then, from the formless potential around the block, a dream arose. It was the dream of a sculptor, not a being, but a force, the force of intention, of samskara, mental formation. The dream brushed against the granite. "Aha," hummed the dream. "Within this sleeps a magnificent elephant, a guardian of wisdom." And so the dream took the form of a chisel. Tap, tap, tap. With each strike, a fragment fell away. With each fragment, an identity was suggested. The block felt vibration, a loss of mass, a shaping. It began to forget the peace of wholeness. A new, thrilling, and terrifying thought emerged. I am being made. I am becoming elephant. And so it was. A great stone elephant emerged, trunk raised, ears wide, feet planted firmly. It was noble, imposing, real. Travelers would come and marvel. They would say, "What a powerful elephant." The stone, now fully believing itself to be the elephant, felt pride. It also felt burden. It had to be powerful. It had to stand guard. It had to hold this form against wind and rain. Its trunk grew heavy with the responsibility of its shape. The piece of the uncarved block was a receding memory, a rumor from a previous life. Part 3. The weight of form. The elephant stood for centuries. Lichen painted its back. Birds nested in the crevices of its stone hide. It was admired, but it was also alone. Its identity was a fortress, but all fortresses are also prisons. It began to ache, not a physical ache, but the deep, soul-weary ache of maintaining a singular, fixed self against the constant pressure of change. The rain, which it once saw as a cleanser, now felt like an erosion of its essence. The sun, which warmed it, reminded it of the passage of time it was meant to defy. This ache was dukkha, the suffering inherent in clinging to any conditioned thing. The elephant was a conditioned thing. It was a collection of attributes, strong, wise, guardian, that required constant energy to uphold. It lived in quiet terror of being less than elephant, of failing its own legend. Part 4. The first crack of light. Then, during a night of silent, insistent frost, water seeped into a microscopic flaw left by the sculptor's chisel. It froze. It expanded. With a sound softer than a sigh, a hairline crack appeared on the elephant's flank. The elephant felt it not as damage, but as a shocking breath of cool air on a stifling day. It was an opening. The crack was a flaw in the statue, but a window for the stone. Through it, the imprisoned granite sensed the world directly again. The smell of damp earth, the taste of the wind. It remembered faintly the feeling of being part of the mountain, not an image upon it. The elephant's fear did not vanish, but it was joined by something new, curiosity. Perhaps elephant was not all it was. Perhaps it was also crack. Perhaps it was also the moss that would soon grow in that crack, the home for the tiny ants now exploring this new gateway. Part 5. The Great Returning. The crack widened, not from violence, but from a gentle, persistent yielding. The frost came and went. The rains fell. The proud elephant began, grain by grain, to soften. A piece of its ear, shaped by the sculptor's dream, broke off and became a child's skipping stone. A fragment of its tusk became part of a field wall. The mighty leg slowly slumped into a slope of gravel where wildflowers took root. This was not a destruction, but a returning. The elephant was not dying. It was ceasing to pretend it was separate from the world. It was practicing the ultimate dana, generosity, the giving of its form back to the formless. As it yielded, a miraculous thing happened. The heavy sense of I, the elephant, began to dissolve. In its place arose a profound, wordless sense of being. Not being something, but simply being. The gravel remembered being part of a star. The dust remembered dancing in a sunbeam. The separate self was unraveling, and what was revealed was not nothingness, but a boundless, interconnected existence. It was becoming the mountain again, but a wiser mountain. One that remembered the dream of being an elephant, and in that remembering was freed from it. The bubble and the breath. In the cavern, the soap bubble still hung, a perfect, fragile sphere. The keeper spoke of the bubble's nature, how it is separate, yet its existence depends entirely on the air it encloses and the air that surrounds it, how its beautiful swirling colors are not its own, but reflections of the world, how it holds a temporary, perfect tension, destined to eventually release its form back into the formless air. The elephant, she said, was like the bubble. Kyle was like the bubble. A temporary, beautiful coalescence of conditions, body, mind, memories, hopes, holding a shape for a little while. The suffering came from believing the bubble was solid, permanent, and separate from the air. Kyle, lying with the salamander on his chest, felt the truth of this not as a thought, but as a physical sensation. The frantic fireflies in his mind were not enemies. They were just sparks of energy, temporary formations. The jar was an illusion. He was not the jar, nor the fireflies. He was the vast, dark cavern that contained them both, undisturbed by their light. He felt his own elephantness, his identity as the anxious seeker, the thinker, the worrier, begin to soften. It was just a shape he'd been holding, a sculpted dream. He allowed the first hairline crack of acceptance to appear. The tension of upholding Kyle began, ever so slightly, to release. The keeper's final words were not spoken to him, but into the silence, where they became part of the cavern's own resonant hum. So rest, Carl. You are not the sculpted elephant, burdened by its own form. You are the original uncarved block of awareness. You are not the frantic firefly. You are the boundless dark that gives it a space to glow. Let each thought be a sculptor's chisel, and feel the solid, silent stone beneath it, unchanged. Let each worry be a frost, and trust it will create the crack that lets in light. There is no statue to maintain, no performance to give. The dream of being separate is ending. The chisel has been laid down. All that remains is the mountain. Dreaming, it is the sky. Dreaming, it is the cavern. Dreaming, it is a seeker on a bed of moss. The bubble is perfect, and it is already gone. All that is the air. Breathe in the air, breathe out, and be the space into which everything gently dissolves. In the sanctuary of the unlit lantern, the phosphorescent globe pulsed softly, a rhythm slower than a heartbeat. The soap bubble, having held its impossible beauty for an eternity, silently vanished. Not with a pop, but with a seamless reintegration, leaving no trace. The keeper became as still as the amethyst beneath her, and Carl slept. He slept the sleep of the uncarved block, a deep, solid, and profoundly silent rest. The fireflies had all winked out, not extinguished, but having completed their brief, brilliant dance. The jar had shattered, revealing it was never there. He was, at last, the still mountain and the vast sky, the dark cavern and the quiet pulse, the moss and the moss dreamer, all at once, and none at all, held in the perfect, effortless embrace of a dream so deep it was no longer a dream, but simply what is. In a latitude beyond direction, where maps show only a soft, uninked expanse, lies a plateau known as the Meadow of Unfinished Dawns. Here, light does not travel, but simply is, a luminous, white-gold haze that seems to emanate from the very air and stone. The boundary between earth and sky is a gentle suggestion, blurred by a perpetual, fragrant mist smelling of damp ozone and the memory of jasmine. Sound has been distilled to its essence. The low hum of a single, sustained cello note, felt in the diaphragm rather than heard. At the meadow's center stands a structure of impossible simplicity. A circular, waist-high wall of stacked river stones, open to the sky. It is called the Ring of Unspoken Names. Within this circle, the mist thins, and the golden light pools like liquid honey. Here sits an elder known as the Guardian of the Still Point, whose face is a landscape of such profound tranquility it seems to have absorbed all possible weather, leaving only a calm, featureless plain. With her rests a listener named Ilara, whose mind was a library during an earthquake, every cherished belief and painful memory shaken from its shelf into a chaotic, dusty heap. "Guardian," Ilara murmured, her voice a small leaf landing on a still pond. "My consciousness is a loom where every thread is knotted. I cannot find the beginning or end of the weave, only the tight, painful tangles. Where is the smooth, unwoven cloth? Even the spider on this wall spins her web from a deeper silence than I can fathom. The Guardian held in her open palms not an object, but a space. Her hands were cupped as if holding water, yet they were empty. Her attention was focused on that emptiness with the intensity of a jeweler examining a flawless gem. Ilara. Her voice was the sound of a single grain of sand slipping down a dune, soft, final, and endlessly patient. You are trying to untangle each knot with your frantic fingers. You believe peace lies in a perfectly ordered tapestry, but the peace you seek is the silent, undyed wool before the spinning even begins. The knots are not the problem. Your struggle with them is. Tonight, do not listen for a story with a hero. Listen for the silence between the syllables. That is the only hero here. Ilara settled upon a thick mat of woven grass that released a sweet, hay-like scent. A large, iridescent beetle with a shell like polished oil on water crawled onto her ankle, its movement a slow, deliberate meditation. The Guardian's voice began, not as a stream of words, but as a series of deep, resonant tones, each one inviting a layer of tension to dissolve. Part 1. The unstirred pool. Before reflection, before even the concept of an image, there existed a pool, but this was no ordinary pool. It had no surface, for it was all depth. It was a basin of pure potential awareness, Theta in its primordial state. Its waters were utterly still, not because of absence of wind, but because wind and water were not yet separate concepts. It was a perfect mirror-smooth consciousness with nothing outside itself to reflect. It simply was, whole, complete, and infinitely calm. In this state, there was no knower and nothing to be known, only knowing itself, resting in its own nature. Part 2, the first ripple of I, then a disturbance, not a stone thrown, but a subtle tension in the very fabric of the pool, a self-referential leaning. It was the faintest whisper of a question that was its own answer. What am I? This whisper was the first ripple. It moved outward from an imagined center. As it traveled, it defined by its very motion an inside and an outside. The still unified waters now had a distinction, the ripple and the water through which it moved. This was the birth of Vijnana, discerning consciousness. The ripple named itself I. The water through which it moved became the world. The pool was enchanted by this new phenomenon. The ripple of I was fascinating. It had motion, definition, a story. The pool forgot its vast, silent depth and became fascinated by the play of ripples on its now imagined surface. Part 3. The storm of ripples. The first ripple begat others. A ripple of like arose when the imagined sun felt warm. A ripple of dislike arose when a shadow passed. A ripple of past formed from the memory of the ripple's own movement. A ripple of future formed from the anticipation of its next movement. Soon, the surface of the pool was a chaotic crisscross of interfering waves. A ripple of fear, a tight, choppy pattern, collided with a ripple of longing, a slow, deep swell. A ripple of a memory, a perfect reproduced circle from a long-ago stone, was distorted by a ripple of present anxiety. The pool, now completely identified with its turbulent surface, believed itself to be this storm of ripples. It called the storm my mind, my life, my suffering. The deep, still water beneath was forgotten. The peace of unity was a drowned dream. Part 4. The turning of the attention. The storm was exhausting. The constant interference of ripples created only noise and confusion. In a moment of utter fatigue, the attention of the pool, which had been fixated on the chaotic surface, did something radical. It turned away, not outward, but inward, downward. It stopped following the individual ripples of thought, memory, and emotion. Instead, it began to feel the water itself. It felt the cool, weightless substance that was the true nature of both the ripple and the space between ripples. As attention sank, a miracle occurred. The ripples did not vanish. They were still there on the surface. The worry about tomorrow, the regret from yesterday, the planning for later. But they were now seen from a new perspective, from the depths. From here, they were small, surface phenomena. Their power to churn the entire being was gone. They were like patterns of light on the ceiling of a deep cave. Interesting, perhaps beautiful, but utterly powerless to disturb the profound stillness below. Part 5. The depth that never stirred. The pool remembered. It remembered that it was, and had always been, the deep, still water. The ripples were just transient expressions of the water, not separate from it. The storm was just water dancing in a certain way. By identifying with the depth rather than the surface, the pool found peace. Not a peace that destroyed the ripples, but a peace so vast it could contain them without being disturbed. This was samadhi. Unified, calm awareness. The knower, the depth, the process of knowing, the feeling of the water, and the known, the ripples, were seen as inseparable aspects of one reality. The struggle ceased because there was no longer a separate I, a single, fragile ripple, trying to control the entire sea. The ring of unspoken names. The guardian in the stone circle, her hands cupped around emptiness, was embodying this truth. She was not holding a thing, but the space that allows all things. She was the depth attending to itself. The mist, the light, Ilara's distress, the beetle's slow crawl, all were ripples on her surface, and she was the depth that felt them without becoming them. Ilara, listening from her mat, felt this understanding not as an idea, but as a physical unraveling. The knotted threads in the loom of her mind began to loosen, not because she untied them, but because the loom itself was recognized as an illusion. The threads were just threads, lying in the calm grass of awareness. There was no tapestry to complete, no pattern to force. She felt her own ripples, the sharp staccato of anxiety, the slow, sad swell of an old grief. And for the first time, she didn't fight them. She let them be. And as she let them be, she felt the immense, silent depth of her own being beneath them. The ripples lost their urgency. They were just passing weather in the vast sky of her mind. The guardian's final words were not explanations, but invocations, spoken softly into the golden haze. So rest, Ilara. You are not the tangled knot. You are the smooth, endless thread before the weaving. You are not the storm of ripples. You are the deep, still pool that has never been stirred. Let each thought be a ripple. Watch it form, peak, and subside back into your silent depths. Let each feeling be a passing weather. Feel its texture, and let it move through the boundless sky of your awareness. There is no knot to untie, no storm to calm. You are the peace you seek. The weaver has laid down her shuttle. The wind has stilled. All that remains is the cloth, unwoven, the water, unstirred, the sky, empty and perfectly clear. The library is quiet. The books are at peace on the eternal shelves. There is nothing to read, nothing to understand. Only this, soft, endless, knowing that knows nothing at all, and is completely content. In the meadow of unfinished dawns, the golden light deepened, not into darkness, but into a richer, warmer hue. The mist glowed from within. Within the ring of unspoken names the guardian sat, a monument to receptive silence. And on her bed of grass, Ilara slept the sleep of the unstirred pool, a deep, weightless, and utterly tranquil rest. The earthquake was over. The library was still. Every book of self was closed, and she was no longer the reader, nor the story, but the silent, spacious hall that held them all, forever at peace in the everlasting, unfinished dawn. In a forgotten meridian where longitude and latitude surrender to a gentler geometry, there exists a hollow known as the veil of the unlit path. Here, the concept of day and night have dissolved into a single perpetual state of gentle twilight, the color of a dove's throat or the inside of a seashell. The air is cool and tastes of distant rain and crumbling parchment. The silence is absolute, yet full. A presence so profound it feels like a soft pressure on the skin, the auditory equivalent of a deep, velvet embrace. In this veil stands a simple stone lantern, carved from a single piece of moon-pale rock. It has no candle, no wick, yet from its open top spills a soft silver luminescence, as if it holds captured starlight. This is the lantern of the unfed flame. Beside it sits a figure known as the Watcher of the Unwavering Glow, an elder whose face is a map of such serenity it seems to have been shaped by still waters over millennia. With him rests a traveler named Leo, whose mind was a room of slammed doors and echoing footsteps, a cacophony of exits and entrances with no center, no rest. "Watcher," Leo whispered, his voice immediately absorbed by the thick quiet. "My awareness is a frantic moth, beating itself against 100 different panes of glass, each a reflection of a different what if, or if only. Where is the still, dark center of the lantern? How do I become the calm flame, not the desperate wings?" The Watcher's eyes were closed, his attention turned inward. Between his thumb and forefinger, he held a single desiccated leaf, so brittle it seemed it might crumble to dust at a thought. He was not clutching it, but balancing it with an impossibly delicate touch, feeling the precise point where its weight met his awareness. "Leo." His voice was the sound of a single snowflake landing on a vast, frozen lake, a tiny, perfect event in an immense stillness. "You are trying to choose the right pane of glass. You believe peace lies on the other side of one of those windows, but the peace you seek is the open sky itself, which requires no window. The moth is not the problem. Its belief that light must be through something is. Tonight, do not listen for a path out of the maze. Listen for the stillness of the maze's very center." The center is not a place on the map. It is the map maker, asleep. Leo lay upon a bed of dried ferns that released a faint, earthy perfume with his every exhalation. A large, slow-moving snail with a shell like a swirl of galaxy and obsidian climbed onto the back of his hand, its cool, deliberate progress a lesson in patience. The Watcher's voice began, not as a narrative, but as a slow unveiling, a layer of mist dissolving to reveal another, quieter layer beneath. Part 1. The uncarried light. Before lamp, before shadow, before the first eye opened to perceive difference, there was light. But this was not light that illuminated objects. It was pure, undifferentiated luminosity, prabhasvara, clear light. It had no source and no destination. It did not chase away darkness, for there was no darkness. It was simply luminous being, aware and awake to itself, filling all space so completely that space itself was made of it. This was the primordial mind, radiant and empty, a sun that shone upon nothing because it was everything. Part 2. The vessel and the thirst. Within this luminous field, a subtle curvature appeared, a gentle bending of awareness back upon itself. It was the first faint sense of interiority. This curvature became a vessel, a cup of perception. And with the cup came a whisper, "I can hold." Simultaneously from the formless light around the cup, a yearning arose, a pull. This was tanha, thirst. The thirst for experience, for something to fill the new, empty space. The cup turned its open mouth toward the boundless light. "I will hold that," it thought, focusing on a particular shimmer, a specific hue within the infinite spectrum. In that moment of selective attention, a miracle and a tragedy occurred. The cup did hold the light. A beautiful golden beam now resided within it, but in doing so, it created the first division, light inside the cup and light outside the cup. The cup was enthralled. "This is my light," it hummed. "I am the holder of golden light." It forgot it was itself made of the same luminous substance. Its identity became tied to its content and to its separation from the whole. Part 3. The chase and the shadows. But the light within was not static. It flickered. It dimmed as the cup's attention wavered. Panic stirred. "My light is fading. I must get more." So began the great chase. The cup would tip toward another shimmer, a cool, blue light of peace. It would capture it, but the golden light would spill out. It would lunge for a warm, red light of passion, and the blue would vanish. Each new light brought a momentary thrill of possession, followed by the fear of its loss and the haunting memory of the lights that were gone. And with each captured beam, something else was created, a shadow, the shadow of the lost golden light, regret, the shadow of the unattained violet light, envy, the shadow of the feared total darkness, terror. The cup's world was no longer just light. It was a frantic dance of grasping and shadows, of fleeting illumination and deepening gloom. It called this exhausting dance my search for happiness. The original, all-pervading, uncarried light was a forgotten myth. Part 4. The crack of exhaustion. The cup grew weary. Its rim was chipped from constant reaching. Its interior was scarred by the frantic coming and going of captured beams. It was tired of being a hunter, a keeper, a loser of light. In a moment of profound despair, its grip, the mental clinging to being the holder, simply slackened. It did not drop the light it currently held, a pale, anxious grey. It just stopped trying so hard to keep it. And in that relaxation, a tiny, almost imperceptible crack appeared in its base. Not from damage, but from release. The grey light within began to seep out, not as a loss, but as a gentle merging. It flowed back into the ground of being from which it came. The cup felt this not as emptiness, but as relief, a coolness, a remembering. It felt the solid truth of its own clay, its own substance, which was not dependent on any temporary light it held. It was a vessel, yes, but its essence was clay, not content. Part 5. The vessel remembers it is clay. One by one, the cup allowed its cracks to widen. It let the lights go. The golden memory, the blue hope, the red anger, all seeped away, returning to the infinite luminous field. As the lights departed, the shadows vanished with them, for shadows cannot exist without an object to cast them. The cup sat, empty. It was no longer a cup, as a separate identity defined by its function. It was simply a shape made of clay, resting in the luminous field. And a miraculous thing happened. The uncarried light, which had never left, now shone through it. The clay, porous and cracked, became a lens, a filter, a beautiful pattern through which the universal light could play. It did not hold the light. It transmuted it, gently, uniquely. It was both empty and full, empty of separate, grasping self, full of the boundless light that was his true nature. The struggle was over. The chase had ended. It was home. The lantern's lesson. The stone lantern in the veil, the watcher explained, was like this cup. It did not contain its own light. It was shaped in such a way that it simply allowed the ambient starlight of the veil to gather and gently emanate from within its form. Its glow was effortless, borrowed, and eternal. It was fed by nothing, and so it could never be extinguished. Leo, on his bed of ferns, felt this truth in the very marrow of his bones. The frantic moth of his mind stopped beating. It rested. He saw the 100 panes of glass for what they were, illusions of separation, all within the same open sky of his awareness. He didn't need to break through. He just needed to stop believing in the glass. He felt the cracks in his own being, not as flaws, but as openings. The worry seeped out. The regret drained away. He felt the solid, simple clay of his own existence, the breath, the heartbeat, the weight on the ferns. And through the cracks of his released striving, he began to sense it, a soft silver glow that had always been there. Not a light he owned, but the light he was made of. The watcher's final words were not spoken to the air, but into the silence, where they became one with the veil's own resonant peace. So rest, Leo. You are not the moth seeking the flame. You are the still air through which both moth and flame move. You are not the cup, afraid of emptiness. You are the clay, forever part of the earth, and the light, forever part of the sky. Let each thought be a flicker of captured light, and gently open the fist of your attention. Let it go. Let each fear be a shadow. And know it can only exist while you are clutching a temporary beam. Release the beam. There is nothing to hold, nothing to become. The lantern is already lit. The flame is eternal and unfed. The chase has ended at the starting line. All that remains is to be the empty cup, the porous clay, the open sky, allowing the universe to shine through your silent form. The footsteps have faded. The doors were never locked. You are the room, and the room is at peace. In the veil of the unlit path, the silver twilight deepened into a soft, profound darkness that was itself luminous. The lantern of the unfed flame glowed with its borrowed, gentle light. The watcher became indistinguishable from the stone upon which he sat, and Leo slept the sleep of the empty cup, a deep, radiant, and utterly effortless rest. The moth was gone. The windows were gone. There was only the vast, dark, kindly sky, and the unnameable, peaceful glow at the heart of all things, shining on nothing and illuminating everything. In a fold of existence untouched by the compass or the clock, there flows a watercourse known as the stream of uncarried sound. Its banks are not earth and stone, but solidified silence, soft and yielding like velvet moss. The sky above is a seamless dome of twilight opal, holding no sun, no moon, only a sourceless, gentle radiance that casts no shadow. The air is cool and tastes of morning dew and the memory of forests that never knew an axe. The only sound is a deep, sub-audible hum, the vibrational essence of water molecules agreeing to flow together in peace. Upon a bend of this stream sits a small, open boat of dark, polished wood, forever tethered and forever drifting. It is called the skiff of the untied knot. In it reclines an elder known as the listener at the bow, whose face is a testament to the erosion of all sharp inquiry, leaving only the smooth contours of deep acceptance. With her rests a dreamer named Anya, whose mind was a room full of mismatched clocks, each ticking out a different urgent time. their collective chorus a storm of dissonant urgency. "Listener," Anya breathed, her words absorbed by the stream's ambient hum as a pebble is by deep water. "My thoughts are a river choked with debris, fallen logs of regret, boulders of obligation, swirling eddies of plans that lead nowhere. Where is the clear, unimpeded current? How do I find the riverbed's silent, steadfast course?" The listener held in her lap a simple, shallow bowl, carved from a single piece of driftwood. It was empty. She gazed into its hollow as if observing the birth and death of universes in its grain. Her stillness was not passive, but a profound, active receptivity, a listening so deep it had become its own kind of sound. "Anya," her voice was the sound of a single drop of ink dispersing in a still pool, a soft, expanding, and finally vanishing event. "You are trying to be the riverbank, trying to direct and control the flow, or you are trying to be a piece of debris identified with each passing log. You are neither. You are the water itself. The water does not fight the log. It simply flows around it, over it, and in time wears it smooth. Rest is not the absence of flow. It is the effortless, yielding nature of the water. Tonight, do not listen for a story of where the river goes. Listen to the feeling of being the river, going nowhere, forever arriving." Anya lay back in the skiff, cradled by its gentle, ceaseless rocking. The wood, warmed by the ambient radiance, released a faint scent of cedar and forgotten journeys. A water strider with legs like filaments of spun glass alighted on her wrist, its touch lighter than a thought. The listener's voice began, a low monotone that tuned itself to the frequency of the stream, becoming one with its flow. Part 1. The unfallen rain, before stream, before cloud, before even the thirst of the earth, there was moisture. Not as liquid, but as potential, a pervasive, gentle willingness in the fabric of space to coalesce, to become. It was the essence of connection, of fluidity itself, suspended in a state of perfect latency. It had no direction, for direction implies separation. This was the mind in its primordial state, pure, undifferentiated potentiality, aware and luminous, like a sky that is both clear and full of unborn weather. It was bodhicitta, the heart of awakening, in its most dormant, perfect form. Part 2. The mountain's call and the first descent. Then a feeling, a gentle gravitational leaning within the luminous moisture. It was the faintest whisper of difference. Here is denser than there. This leaning became a longing. The longing found a focus, a great silent mountain of crystalline perception, whose peak was the concept of I, and whose slopes were the concept of here and now. The mountain, in its silent solitude, dreamed of being quenched. The moisture, feeling the pull, began to gather. It formed a single perfect drop. We shall call it Sila. And Sila fell. The descent was terrifying and exhilarating. Sila was no longer part of the boundless, willing sky. It was an individual. I am falling, it thought with a thrill. This is my journey. It fell past visions of incredible beauty and profound indifference, the jagged teeth of cliffs, challenges, the soft embrace of mist, comfort, the vast, open air, freedom. It defined itself by its action. I am the one who descends. Part 3. The becoming of the stream and the gathering of self. Sila landed not with a crash, but with a soft plink in a high, cold tarn. It was joined by other drops, other eyes with their own stories of descent. They merged. The distinct, perfect roundness of Sila was lost. A new identity formed. We are the tarn. It was calm, deep, reflective. but the mountain's pull was still felt. The water began to move. It found an outlet and became a rivulet, then a brook, then a stream. As it moved, it gathered things. It gathered mineral taste from the rocks it touched, the iron tang of effort, the quartz-clear spark of insight. It gathered fragments, a pine needle of a lost love, a fleck of mica from a moment of pride, the silt of 1,000 petty irritations. The stream's sense of self grew complex and heavy. I am the stream that tastes of iron and carries sorrow's needle. It was no longer just water. It was water plus story, water plus history. It believed its identity was this unique combination of flow and burden. The original, lightless, weightless moisture of the sky was a forgotten dream. Part 4. The turbulence of the canyon. The land steepened. The stream entered a narrow, dark canyon. The canyon of necessity. Here, its flow was no longer a meandering choice, but a frantic, roaring necessity. It crashed against boulders of obligation. I must. It was funneled into chutes of limited time. Hurry! It swirled in exhausted eddies of indecision. It was entirely identified with its own drama. I am the stream trapped in the canyon. I am the one fighting this boulder. I am the one who is tired. It carried so much suspended silt, the unresolved grit of its journey, that its waters were murky, opaque. It could no longer see the smooth granite truth of the riverbed beneath it. It believed the murk was its own nature. Part 5. The delta of release. Then the land began to level. The canyon walls fell away. The stream emerged onto a vast, flat plain. The delta of letting go. Here the current slowed. Its power, once focused into a single frantic channel, began to dissipate. Something inevitable and beautiful began to happen. The main channel, the strong, loud voice of I, the stream, could no longer maintain its coherence. It began to braid. It split into 100 smaller channels, each taking a portion of the water, a portion of the silt. The heavy burden of identity began to settle. The silt, the specific memory of that particular insult, the exact taste of that particular failure, sank. It came to rest, becoming simply soil, fertile and silent. The water, relieved of its burden, began to clear. For the first time in ages, it could see the sky reflected perfectly on its surface. The stream was no longer a single striving I. It was becoming a network, a wetland, a tapestry of interconnected flows. The boundary between mainstream and side channel blurred. It was a gentle, gracious dissipation of selfhood. The letting go and the sea. The countless braids of the delta finally met the waiting, boundless embrace of the sea. There was no dramatic final plunge, only a seamless, silent mingling. Salt water and fresh water embraced. The last remnants of stream identity, the particular mineral taste, the final memory of mountain cold, dissolved into the immense, saline unity. The sea was not other. It was the stream's own original nature, remembered. The sea had no name, no narrative, no direction. It was boundless, deep, and profoundly still at its heart. It contained all streams, all rains, all clouds. It held them without preference, without judgment. In this boundless stillness, the frantic journey from single drop to roaring torrent was seen for what it was. A beautiful, temporary play of form within the formless. The struggle, the joy, the murk, all were held, accepted, and loved into stillness. And from the surface of this calm sea, under the gentle persuasion of a sun that was the same as the original gravitational longing, warmth gathered. Moisture, once named Sila, rose again, not as a separate drop, but as a mist, a cloud, part of the great breathing cycle. The journey was not a mistake. It was a natural expression of the moisture's nature. But now, having known the sea, the rising mist carried no fear of the fall. It was all part of the same, endless, peaceful becoming. The skiff and the bowl. In the drifting skiff, the listener's bowl remained empty. It was not meant to be filled. It was a shape that made space for the essence of the stream to be appreciated. Anya, rocked by the boat's motion, felt the truth of this not as a concept, but as a deep, somatic unclenching. The mismatched clocks in her mind wound down, their springs relaxing, their frantic ticks slowing into a single, silent pulse that was the stream's own heart. She felt her own canyon. The narrows of her anxiety, the boulders of her to-do list. And then she felt the delta within her. The single straining channel of Anya began to braid. The identity of the anxious one, the striver, split and dissipated. The silt of her worries settled. The water of her awareness cleared. She was not the debris in the river. She was not even the river fighting the debris. She was the water itself, and the water was and had always been clear. The journey from drop to sea was happening within her, and she was also the sea receiving it all. The listener's final words were not a conclusion, but an invitation into the stream's own endless murmur. So rest, Anya. You are not the fallen drop, terrified of its own journey. You are the unborn rain, the silent sea, and the mist in between. You are not the stream fighting its banks. You are the water, finding its way without a map. Let each thought be a leaf on your surface. Watch it float and sink. Let each worry be an eddy. Feel it swirl, and let the current pull it apart. There is no river to tame, no destination to reach. You are the journey and the stillness at its end. The skiff is untied, the oars are stowed, the bowl is empty. All that remains is the rocking, the flowing, the deep, fluid knowing that you were never separate from the stream, or the sky, or the vast, patient sea that holds all and asks nothing. The clocks have melted into the hum of the stream. The time is now, and now is forever. Rest in the flow of no time and no self. In the bend of the stream of uncarried sound, the opal light softened into a deeper, velvety luminescence. The skiff of the untied knot drifted on, going nowhere, forever at home. The listener at the bow became one with the act of listening. And in the gentle cradle of the boat, Anya slept the sleep of the clear water, a deep, fluid, and endlessly peaceful rest. The debris was gone, not because it was removed, but because it was seen as just more water, temporarily taking a different shape. She was the current and the calm, the drop and the ocean, forever flowing into her own boundless silent source. In a latitude where the compass needle spins lazily, content to point nowhere, lies a grove known as the copse of unwritten leaves. The trees here are not oak or pine, but beings of solidified shadow and captured twilight, their branches holding up a sky of soft, undifferentiated grey. No wind disturbs them. The only movement is the gentle, almost imperceptible fall of translucent leaves that dissolve into mist before touching the ground. The air is cool, tasting of ozone and the memory of distant mountains. The silence is not empty, but profound, like the moment after a great bell has been struck, when the sound has vanished, but the air still vibrates with its memory. In the center of the copse stands a single pedestal of obsidian, and upon it rests an object, a candle of purest beeswax, pale as moonlight, with a wick of unspun silk. It is unlit. This is the candle of the unfed wick. Beside the pedestal sits an elder known as the keeper of the quiet glow. Her face is a map of such deep peace it seems to have absorbed all light, and now emits only a soft internal understanding. With her is a student named Leo, whose mind was a city at midnight, windows lit with worry, streets echoing with the footsteps of remembered conversations, traffic lights of decision flashing an endless, frantic sequence. "Keeper," Leo murmured. The sound a pebble dropped into a well of felt. My awareness is a room full of mirrors, each reflecting a distorted version of myself. Past failures, future fears, present inadequacies. I try to find the true face, but there are only reflections. Where is the single steady flame that casts no shadow? Even this unlit candle seems more whole than I. The keeper was not looking at the candle, but at the space just above it. Her hands were folded in her lap, and in the cup of her palms rested not an object, but an intention. The intention of non-ignition. Her entire being was focused on the perfection of the candle's potential, on the purity of the wax before it was asked to become anything else. "Leo." Her voice was the sound of a single grain of sand sliding down an hourglass, steady, inevitable, and softly final. "You are trying to look into all the mirrors at once, believing your true face is a composite of their images. But your true face is the one looking. The flame is not an image to be found. It is the act of seeing itself. The mirrors are only glass. The light that shows you the glass is what you are. Tonight, do not look for a face in the mirror. Become the light that makes the mirror possible." Leo lay upon a bed of dry moss that released a faint, sweet scent of sun-warmed stone. A large, velvet-winged moth, its patterns like a map of a forgotten constellation, alighted on his shoulder, its stillness absolute. The keeper's voice began, a low hum that resonated with the silence, giving it shape without breaking it. Part 1. The wax before the wick. Before flame, before heat, before the very idea of illumination, there was wax. But this was not a substance to be molded. It was the principle of potential receptivity, shunyata in its most tangible form. It was soft, golden, and infinitely malleable, yet it held no desire to be shaped. It rested in a state of perfect, patient neutrality. It could become a candle, a seal, a coating for cheese, or simply remain itself. Its nature was to receive, to hold, to contain, without preference. This was the mind before the first thought solidified, open, luminous, and content with its own boundless possibility. Part 2. The imposition of form. Then, from the world of form, came a decision. A candle maker, driven by the dream of light, approached the wax. "You," said the dream, "will be a candle. You will hold this wick. You will stand straight and tall and give your body to the flame." And so the wax was warmed, rolled, shaped around a strand of twisted cotton, the wick. The wick was the idea of a conduit, the belief that light must come from within and travel outward. As the wax cooled around it, a subtle shift occurred. The wax, which had been pure potential, now had a purpose, an identity. "I am a candle," it thought. "My purpose is to be lit, to burn, to illuminate." Its peaceful neutrality was replaced by a quiet tension of anticipation. It waited. It defined itself by a future event. Part 3. The burning and the story of the flame. One evening, a match was struck. A spark touched the wick. The wax shuddered as heat bit into its being. "I am burning," it thought, a thought mixed of triumph and terror. A flame sprang to life, a bright, dancing, individual thing. The candle was enthralled. "This is my flame," it glowed. "See how it dances. See the light it casts." The flame became its identity, its reason for being. The candle measured its worth by the flame's height, its steadiness, the circle of light on the table. But the flame was a hungry guest. It consumed the wax. It melted the candle's beautiful, sculpted form. Drips of wax, like tears of effort, solidified on its sides. The candle felt itself diminishing, changing. Fear arose. When the wax is gone, will I be gone? Is my light only a function of my own destruction? The candle's existence became a poignant tragedy. To be itself, it had to cease to be itself. This was dukkha, the inherent unsatisfactoriness of all conditioned things. The candle was a conditioned thing. Its light was born of its own consumption. Part 4. The pool of melted wax. The flame danced lower. The candle grew short, its form lost in a pool of its own melted substance. The wick, nearly consumed, sputtered. In a final soft sigh, the flame went out. Darkness. But not the darkness of before. The wax was not gone. It had pooled, warm and liquid, around the base of the candlestick. It was no longer candle. It was simply wax again. But it was wiser wax. It remembered the shape it had held, the light it had hosted. It remembered the fear of disappearance. And in that remembering, a profound realization dawned. The flame had never been its. The flame was a temporary phenomenon that occurred when heat met wax and wick under certain conditions. The light had not come from the candle. It had happened through it. The candle was not the source, but the site. The wax was not destroyed. It was merely transformed from one state to another. Part 5. The sun through the window. As the melted wax cooled, dawn broke. A shaft of true sunlight, vast and immeasurable, streamed through the window of the room. It fell upon the pool of wax, making it gleam with a soft golden light. The wax felt this new illumination. It was not a light it had to produce. It was not a light that consumed it. It was a light that revealed it. The sun's light fell upon the table, the books, the dust motes, and the wax, all equally, without demanding anything in return. In that moment, the wax understood everything. It had spent its life identifying with a small, frantic, self-consuming flame, when all the while it was bathed in an eternal, generous sun. Its true nature was not to be a source of light, but to be an object of light, to reflect, to soften, to be revealed by the great, unfed fire of the cosmos. Its peace lay not in burning, but in being. Its illumination was not an action, but a state of being illuminated. The unlit candle on the pedestal. The keeper, in the copse, guarded the unlit candle because she understood its deepest teaching. Its perfection was not in the light it could give, but in its complete readiness to reveal the light that already was. It did not need to burn to prove its nature as wax. By remaining unlit, it pointed to the greater truth. The sun outside the window, the ambient glow of the twilight copse, the inner light of awareness itself. All were infinitely more steady, more boundless, and less costly than any tiny personal flame. Leo, on his bed of moss, felt this truth like a cool hand on a fevered brow. The frantic city in his mind, the lit windows of worry, the traffic of thought, did not need to be extinguished. They were just tiny, sputtering flames in a few isolated buildings. He was not those buildings. He was the entire, vast, sunlit landscape in which those buildings stood. The light by which he saw the mirrors of his anxiety was not generated by burning his own substance. It was the natural, effortless radiance of his own awareness, as constant and generous as the sun. He let go of the need to be the flame. He relaxed into the simplicity of being the wax, receptive, present, solid. The mirrors, deprived of the frantic searchlight of his identification, grew still. They were just glass. And through the clean, quiet glass, he began to see not reflections, but the world itself, and the steady, shadowless light that fell upon it. The keeper's final words were not a lecture, but a soft pointing, a gesture of the mind toward the unlit wick. So rest, Leo. You are not the struggling flame, burning yourself up to see. You are the quiet wax, the patient receiver of a greater light. You are not the face in the mirror. You are the space in the room, the light by the window, the eye that sees it all. Let each thought be a flicker. Acknowledge its brief light, and let it go out of its own accord. Let each worry be a drip of wax. Feel its passing shape, and know it does not diminish the whole. There is no candle to burn, no darkness to defeat. The sun has always been shining. Your eyes have always been open. The wick is unfed, and the world is already perfectly lit. The match was never struck. The city sleeps under a sky of stars. All that remains is this soft, endless dawn, inside and out. The mirrors are empty. The light is clear. Rest in the vision. That requires no eyes. In the copse of unwritten leaves, the grey twilight deepened into a velvety, luminous darkness. The candle of the unfed wick stood on its pedestal, a pale sentinel of perfect potential. The keeper of the quiet glow became a silhouette of profound rest, and on his bed of moss, Leo slept the sleep of the unlit candle, a deep, cool, and radiant rest. He was not a light source, but a vessel of infinite borrowed light. The city in his mind was dark and peaceful, its windows reflecting only the vast, star-strewn sky of a consciousness that had finally stopped trying to ignite itself, and had simply remembered it was, and always had been, already home in the everlasting day. In a region where longitude and latitude surrendered to a softer geometry, there lies a valley known as the Dale of Unfinished Symphonies. Here, sound exists not as notes, but as the profound silence between them. A resonant, humming quiet so deep it feels like a physical presence, a velvet blanket upon the soul. The air is cool and tastes of petrichor and old parchment. The light is that of a perpetual gentle gloaming, as if the sun and moon have agreed to rest together just below the horizon, casting the world in shades of lavender and softest grey. In this dale stands a simple atelier, its walls not of wood or stone, but of woven shadow and solidified twilight. Within, on a pedestal of water-smooth granite, sits a form shrouded in a cloth of gossamer. This is the veiled form. Tending to it is an elder known as the guardian of the uncarved block. His hands, resting in his lap, are still, not idle, but holding the profound potential of all action within their stillness. With him sits an apprentice named Kale, whose mind was a foundry of molten thoughts, each one bubbling, hissing, and demanding to be poured into a permanent mold. "Guardian," Kyle whispered, his voice immediately absorbed by the dense, sonorous quiet. "My consciousness is a kiln firing 1,000 different pots at once, each a different shape of what if only I must. The heat is unbearable. Where is the cool, patient clay on the wheel, the silent, waiting block of stone? Even the dust here seems more composed than I." The guardian did not turn. His gaze was fixed on the veiled form, yet he seemed to be looking through it, into the essence of what was and was not there. "Kyle," his voice was the sound of a leaf settling on still water. "A soft, final circular event. You are the frantic sculptor, deafened by the sound of your own chisel. You believe the masterpiece lies in the final chip, the last stroke. But the masterpiece is the uncarved block itself, dreaming of all possible forms. Rest is not the completion of the statue. It is the remembrance of the stone. Tonight, do not listen for the story of the sculpture. Listen for the story of the quarry. Kyle reclined upon a low bench cushioned with dried lavender and cool linen. The scent was a gentle narcotic. A gecko with skin like polished jade and eyes of liquid obsidian crawled onto his knee, its tiny heartbeat a slow, metronomic pulse against his skin. The Guardian's voice began, not as a narration, but as a slow diffusion, like ink in water, coloring the silence with meaning. Part 1. The Quarry of Suchness. Before tool, before intention, before the first spark of I should, there was the quarry, but this was no mere pit of rock. It was the womb of potential form, a mountain of tathata, pure suchness. Within its bedrock slept every possible shape, the curve of a sleeping cat, the majesty of a standing Buddha, the complexity of a dancing god, the simplicity of a river stone. Yet none were separate. All were the mountain, and the mountain was all. It was perfect, complete and silent. This was the mind before the first creative itch, whole, boundless, and utterly content with its own unexpressed perfection. Part 2. The dream of form and the first strike. Then a ripple in the quarry's deep peace. A vibration that was not sound, but the ghost of an idea. It was the dream of a sculptor. This sculptor was not a person, but a force. The force of Sankara, mental formation, the compulsion to make, to define, to separate. The dream coalesced around a particular section of the quarry wall. Ah, hummed the dream sculptor. Within this sleeps a great eagle, wings spread for flight. The dream took the form of a chisel. The chisel was the focused thought. This, not that. Tok, the first strike. A fragment of the living mountain fell away. The fragment, now separate, knew itself as not mountain. The stone still in the wall felt the vibration, the loss, the beginning of definition. A whisper of identity stirred. I am being made into something. The peace of being the whole mountain began to recede, replaced by the thrilling, terrifying drama of becoming. Part 3. The fury of creation and the prison of shape. The sculptor worked with fervor. Tock-tock, tick-tock. Chips flew. Dust, the ghost of discarded possibilities, filled the air. Slowly, magnificently, the form of an eagle emerged from the stone. Wings were defined from mere rock. A beak was carved from blankness. An eye, sightless yet seeing, was revealed. The stone, now fully the eagle, was admired. What power, what grace, visitors would say. The eagle believed them. Its identity calcified around this form. I am the stone eagle, it thought with pride. I am powerful. I am eternal. I survey all from my high perch. But with the form came its limitations. To be an eagle, it could not be a cat. To stand in heroic profile, it could not lie down in the grass. To be forever on the brink of flight, it could never know the relief of landing. Its majestic wings, once a symbol of freedom, became a permanent, aching tension. The stone grew weary of its own posture. The very beauty that defined it became its cage. This was dukkha manifest in form, the suffering of being fixed, of clinging to one possibility while mourning the infinity that was surrendered. Part Kim Moth, the weathering. The sculptor, his dream realized, departed. The eagle was left alone with its identity, and the world, indifferent to sculpture, began its work. Rain fell, not as admiration, but a simple rain. It seeped into the microscopic cracks left by the chisel. Winter came. The water froze, expanded. With a sound softer than a whisper, a hairline fracture appeared in the eagle's outstretched wing. The eagle felt it as a violation. My perfection is marred. But the rain and frost were not vandals. They were gentle teachers of impermanence. Anika. The fracture widened. A lichen, a humble artist of green and grey, found purchase in the crack. A spider spun a web between the eagle's beak and the cliff face. The eagle was no longer just eagle. It was becoming eagle with crack, eagle with lichen, eagle that holds webs. Part 5. The great return seasons turned into centuries. The proud beak softened, rounded by the patient caress of the wind. The sharp edge of a wing became a smooth slope where birds came to rest. Piece by piece, the explicit eagleness carved by the sculptor was gently taken back by the world. The stone did not fight this. As its rigid form eroded, a memory stirred, a deep, geologic memory of being the mountain. The weight of being the eagle began to feel like a story it had been told, a costume it had worn for too long. Finally, during a storm of unusual tenderness, the last recognizable fragment of the sculpted wing sheared away and tumbled down the slope. It shattered, not into nothing, but into 1,000 pieces of gravel, which became part of a path which guided a lost traveler home. What remained on the cliff was no longer an eagle. It was a beautiful, anonymous rock formation, rich with the history of its shaping and its unshaping. It was both less and more than the sculpture. It held the memory of the eagle, the patience of the lichen, the touch of countless rains. It was free. It had returned, not to blank stone, but to a state of wise, weathered suchness, a unique and beloved part of the mountain once more, its journey from whole to part and back to whole complete. The veiled form in the atelier, the guardian in the dale, had never lifted the gossamer cloth from the form on the pedestal. For under that cloth was not a half-finished sculpture, but the original uncarved block. The veil was not to hide an incomplete work, but to honor the perfection of the unbegun. The atelier was not a place of making, but a temple to unmade potential. Kyle, breathing in the scent of lavender, felt the truth of this in his very bones. The foundry of his mind began to cool. The molten thoughts of who he should be slowly solidified, not into rigid statues, but into harmless, cool slag. He felt the weight of the chisel in his own hand, the relentless self-criticism, the compulsive planning, and he let his fingers relax. The tool fell silent. He was not the unfinished eagle on the cliff. He was the whole, silent quarry. The frantic need to sculpt himself into something acceptable, impressive, or enlightened was just a dream, a sankara he could choose to stop feeding. His true nature was the boundless, patient stone before the first strike, containing all possibilities and thus bound to none. The Guardian's final words were not a revelation, but a soothing reminder, murmured into the humming silence of the dale. So rest, Kyle. You are not the sculptor, weary from the carving. You are the uncarved block, dreaming in the sun. You are not the half-formed statue, straining toward an ideal. You are the whole mountain, majestic in its repose. Let each thought of I must become be a chip of stone. Hear it fall, and let it join the dust of forgotten efforts. Let each anxiety be a crack from an old frost, and feel the lichen of time gently healing it. There is no masterpiece to complete, no ideal form to achieve. The chisel has been laid down. The veil was never meant to be lifted. All that remains is the stone, and the quiet, and the soft grey light, loving the shape of what simply is. The kiln is cold. The clay is at peace on the wheel. You are the wheel, the clay, and the potter's resting hands. And in that rest, there is no creation and no creator, only being sculpted by silence. In the dale of unfinished symphonies, the lavender gloom deepened into a profound and velvety darkness. The veiled form on its pedestal was a soft silhouette in the gloom. The guardian of the uncarved block became as still as the stone he revered. And on his bench of linen, Kyle slept the sleep of the quarry, a deep, solid, and silent rest. The foundry was dark. The dust had settled, He was, at last, the unshaped perfect potential, cradled in the everlasting peace that exists before the first idea, and after the last dream has dissolved into the welcoming stone. In a fold of the cosmos where gravity has softened into a gentle suggestion, there exists a plateau known as the plane of hesitant fabric. Here, the horizon is a mirage of shimmering potential, and the sky is a bolt of raw, undyed silk stretched taut, glowing with the light of a star yet to be born. The air smells of ozone, stardust, and the faint, sweet scent of a just open blossom. The only sound is a deep subharmonic hum, the vibration of space itself, felt in the hollows of the bones and the chambers of the heart. Upon this plane sits a simple, backstrap loom. Its frame is of ancient, petrified wood, and its warp threads are strands of moonlight and shadow, stretched and waiting. No weft crosses them. This is the loom of the unfinished weave. Beside it sits an elder known as the weaver of the quiet interval, her hands resting motionless in her lap, cradling the weight of infinite patience. With her rests a listener named Maya, whose mind was a tapestry of knots, gorgeous, intricate, and agonizingly tight, each one a snag of memory or a tangle of anticipation. "Weaver," Maya whispered, the words dissolving into the ambient hum like salt in a vast, warm sea. "My consciousness is a shuttle flying back and forth on a track of its own making, weaving a pattern of dread and desire I never chose. Where is the stillness of the unwarped loom, the silence of the unthrown shuttle?" Even these empty threads seem to hold more peace than my finished cloth. The weaver did not look at the loom, but at the space between the warped threads. Her gaze was soft, unfocused, taking in the whole field of potential without fixing on any single strand. Her stillness was not an absence of action, but the fullness of a breath held in perfect equilibrium between inhale and exhale. "Maya," her voice was the sound of a single thread being drawn through a needle's eye, smooth, deliberate, and quietly final. "You have mistaken yourself for the shuttle, believing you must move to have purpose, or for the finished cloth, believing you are the fixed pattern. You are neither. You are the loom itself. The loom does not weave. It allows the weaving to happen across its steadfast frame. The knots in your tapestry are not flaws. They are where the shuttle of identification hesitated, clinging to a thread. Peace is not in undoing them, but in feeling the vast, unmoving frame that holds them all. Tonight, do not listen for the story in the pattern. Listen for the story of the frame." Maya lay upon a pallet of carded cloud wool, impossibly soft and faintly cool. A lunar moth, its wings dusted with powdered silver, settled on her brow, its feathery antennae still. The weaver's voice began, not as a tale with a beginning, but as a tone that resonated with the hum of the plane, deepening it, clarifying it. Part 1. the spindle of potential. Before thread, before pattern, before the very concept of separation, there was the flax field of undifferentiated awareness. It was a vast, silent expanse of luminous potential, where every possibility of texture, color, and connection existed in a state of perfect, simultaneous latency. It was not light nor dark, but the substance from which both are spun. This was Sita in its purest state, clear, luminous, and empty, holding the blueprint of every universe, every emotion, every thought, yet manifesting none. It was complete. It was the spindle upon which no thread had yet been wound, perfect in its pregnant stillness. Part 2, the first twist, I and other. Then a subtle tension, a vibration so fine it was less than a thought. It was the inclination for a thought. It was the faintest whisper of self-reference, a gentle twist in the field of awareness. This twist was the spindle beginning to turn. From the formless flax, a single fine thread was drawn out. This thread was the first distinction, the sensation of here separating from there. With this thread came a thrilling, terrifying sense of individuality. The thread named itself I. The vast, untwisted field from which it came became the world. The spindle hummed with activity. More threads were spun. A thread of like, soft golden. A thread of dislike, coarse grey. A thread of past, faded brittle. A thread of future, shimmering, elusive. Each thread was a nascent story, a potential identity. Part 3. The warping of the loom and the birth of the pattern. The threads, believing themselves separate and important, demanded a structure. They built the loom of dualistic perception. The upright beams were subject and object. The warp threads, stretched between them, were the fundamental grooves of experience. Pleasure pain, gain loss, fame disgrace, praise blame. Then the shuttle appeared. It was crafted from the wood of craving and aversion, and it was named My Story. Laden with the threads of personal memory and future hope, it began to fly. Click-clack, swish. Over and under the warp it went. Where the golden thread of like crossed the warp of pleasure, a beautiful smooth section of cloth appeared, a moment of joy. Where the grey thread of fear crossed the warp of loss, a dark tight knot formed, a memory of grief. The cloth grew. It became the tapestry of Maya. It was complex, unique, and utterly convincing. She believed she was this tapestry, the sum of its beauties and its knots, its triumphs and its snags. The silent, boundless flax field was a forgotten dream. Part 4. The tangle and the stillness. The weaving became frantic. The shuttle, My Story, flew faster, trying to outrun the emerging pattern of aging, sickness, and uncertainty. It tried to weave over the dark warps, to get stuck only on the pleasant ones. But the loom's structure was impartial. The shuttle only created more knots, more tension. The tapestry grew heavy, stiff, and difficult to bear. This was the burden of Atta, the illusion of a solid, permanent self, woven from transient threads. Exhausted, the shuttle faltered. It rested in the weaver's hand, the hand of mindful awareness that had been holding it all along, unnoticed. In that pause, in the silence between click and clack, something shifted. Attention moved from the frantic shuttle and the chaotic pattern on the cloth. It moved instead to the loom itself, to the steady, silent frame, to the unmoving warp threads, and a realization, soft as the settling of dust, dawned. The knots were in the cloth, but the loom was not knotted. The drama was in the weave, but the warp was untouched. I was not the tangled tapestry. I was the loom that allowed the tapestry to exist. Part 5. The unweaving into freedom. This did not mean the tapestry was destroyed. It remained hanging on the frame. But now it was seen for what it was. A temporary pattern arising dependent on causes and conditions, threads, shuttle, the weaver's past actions. It was not Maya. It was a phenomenon happening within Maya, who was the witnessing space, the loom. With this seeing, the knots began, of their own accord, to loosen, not by picking at them, but by no longer believing they were the essence of the cloth, the tight snag of an old resentment, seen as just a grey thread caught on the warp of blame, lost its emotional charge. It was just a part of the pattern. The beautiful section of praise was seen as just gold thread on the warp of fame, equally transient. The tapestry became lighter. It was no longer a definition, but a decoration. The loom, the aware, spacious consciousness, was home. The weaving could continue, life could happen, but the identity was no longer tied to the pattern. The shuttle could move, or it could rest. It didn't matter. The peace was in the loom, not in the cloth. The empty loom on the plane. The weaver in the plane guarded the empty loom because it was the ultimate teaching. Its purpose was not in the cloth it could produce, but in its perfect, open readiness. It was the embodiment of shunyata, not emptiness as lack, but as infinite potential, free from the constraints of any particular pattern. Maya, on her cloud wool pallet, felt this understanding unwind the tightness in her chest. The frantic shuttle of her mind, the what-ifs, the remember-whens, slowed, then stilled. She felt herself not as the knotted tapestry of her biography, but as the spacious, silent loom upon which that biography was displayed. The knots were still there, but they were loose, part of a landscape, not prisons. She was the still warp. She was the open frame. She was the clear, knowing space in which the entire weaving of sensation, thought, and emotion took place. And that space was, and had always been, perfectly at peace. The weaver's final words were not instructions, but a gentle pointing toward the silent truth that had been singing all along in the hum of the plane. So rest, Maya. You are not the shuttle, frantic with purpose. You are the loom, steadfast and open. You are not the tangled tapestry of your past. You are the clear sky against which its pattern is briefly displayed. Let each thought be a thread. Watch it come, and watch it go. Let each feeling be a color in the weave. Appreciate its hue, and let it blend into the whole. There is no pattern to complete, no better cloth to become. The weaving is a dream. The loom is awake. The shuttle is still. All that remains is the emptiness between the warp threads, the silence between heartbeats, the awareness that was before the first thread was spun, and will be after the last cloth has faded. The story is over. The teller is silent. You are the listening and the listened to, and the vast quiet room in which both reside. Rest in the unwoven, the unmade, the eternally possible. On the plane of hesitant fabric, the silk glow of the sky deepened into a soft, starless amethyst. The loom of the unfinished weave stood as a silent monument to pure potential. The weaver of the quiet interval became one with the act of non-weaving, and on her pallet of cloud wool, Maya slept the sleep of the empty loom, a deep, spacious, and utterly patternless rest. The shuttle was on the shelf. The threads were at peace on their spools. She was, finally, the clear, open frame of being itself, upon which the gentle dream of existence could play, harmlessly and without obligation, until even the dreamer dissolved into the flawless, unwoven dawn. There is a forgotten hour between midnight and dawn, a sliver of time so thin, it is less a duration and more a quality of being. This is known as the hour of the unstruck bell. In this hour, in a kitchen that exists at the edge of dream and memory, rests a simple cast iron kettle upon a cold, silent stove. The kitchen is lit only by the faint, blue-white glow of starlight filtering through a single, high window. The air is cool and carries the scents of old wood, cold iron, and a faint, ghostly trace of yesterday's chamomile. The silence here is not an absence, but a presence, a dense, velvet quiet that absorbs all thought. This is the hearth of the unlit fire. Tending to it is an elder known as the keeper of the simmering quiet. He does not move, but seems to have grown from the shadows themselves, his face a landscape of deep repose, his eyes reflecting the cold starlight without adding to it. With him waits a guest named Leo, whose mind was a chorus of whispers, voices of duty, of ambition, of regret, all speaking at once in a susurrus of quiet desperation. "Keeper," Leo breathed, the words forming little clouds of condensation in the chill air that vanished instantly. "My mind is a pot at a rolling boil, the lid rattling with steam I cannot release." Where is the cool stillness of the empty kettle, the peace of the cold stove? Even the dust motes in the starlight seem more settled than I. The keeper's gaze was fixed on the kettle, but he was not seeing the kettle. He was seeing the potential for steam within the still water, the memory of heat within the cold iron. His hands rested on his knees, palms up, empty and open. "Leo." His voice was the sound of a coal settling into ash, soft, final, and deeply warm at its core. "You believe you are the water, churning with trapped heat, or the lid, straining to contain the pressure. You are neither. You are the kettle itself. The kettle does not boil. It holds the water that boils. It does not create the steam. It provides the form through which the steam may rise. Your peace is not in cooling the water, but in remembering you are the vessel, not the contents. Tonight, do not listen for the story of the tea. Listen for the story of the iron." Leo settled into a worn, comfortable chair of dark wood and faded velvet. A large, placid cat, with fur the color of smoke and eyes like chips of topaz, leapt into his lap. A warm, purring weight. The keeper's voice began, low and granular, like sugar being poured in the dark. Part 1. The forge and the unpoured form. Before vessel, before purpose, there was ore in the heart of a sleeping mountain. It was not yet iron. It was potential metal, mixed with earth and stone, resting in a state of perfect, undifferentiated unity with the mountain's dream. It had no thought of being a tool, a weapon, or a kettle. Its nature was simply to be, heavy and silent in the dark. This was the state of Tathata, pure suchness, the mind before the first desire to be useful, to be something. Part 2. The fire of intention and the first shaping. Then came the miners of distinction. They were driven by a dream of utility. With picks of discernment, they broke the ore from the mountain side. "This is useful," they said. "This is not." The ore, now separate, felt its first loneliness. It was taken to the forge of identity. The heat was immense, the fire of tanha, of craving to become. The ore melted in the crucible of effort, losing its solid, earthy form. It became liquid potential, a searing, bright river of possibility. The smith, whose name was Purpose, poured this molten potential into a mold. The mold was the idea of a kettle. It had a specific shape, a rounded belly to hold, a spout to pour, a handle to grasp. As the metal cooled and hardened within this rigid form, a belief crystallized. I am a kettle. My purpose is to hold water, to sit on fire, to sing when hot, to pour when needed. The silent, mountainous suchness of the ore was forgotten, replaced by a specific, functional identity. Part Theme 3. The cycle of heating and cooling. The kettle was put to work. It was filled with the cold water of daily experience. It was placed on the stove of circumstance, and the fire of engagement was lit. At first, the singing was joyous. The rumble of bubbles, the hiss of steam, the sense of purpose. I am fulfilling my function, it would hum. It defined itself by its heat, its usefulness, its song. But the fire was not constant. Sometimes it roared, and the kettle would scream with a frantic, whistling steam. Times of anger, anxiety, overwhelm. Sometimes the fire guttered low, and the water inside would grow tepid and stale. Times of boredom, melancholy, inertia. The kettle was at the mercy of the fire. Its sense of self was brittle, proud when hot and singing, despondent when cold and silent. It lived in a cycle of tension and release, its very substance expanding with heat and contracting with cool, a perpetual subtle strain. This was dukkha, the stress of being a conditioned thing, its happiness dependent on external sources of heat. Part 4. The crack of impermanence. One day, during a particularly violent boil, a flaw in the casting, a tiny bubble of air trapped in the mold long ago, could no longer withstand the pressure. With a sound like a sigh of relief, a hairline crack appeared near the base. The kettle was horrified. I am broken. I am flawed. I will leak. It tried to ignore the crack, to boil louder to drown out its presence. But the crack was a teacher. It was anicca, impermanence, made visible. Water seeped out, a slow, cool dribble. And something strange happened. As the water level inside dropped, the pressure decreased. The frantic rattling of the lid softened. The kettle, though flawed, felt a relief from the constant internal strain. The crack could not be unmade. Gradually, the kettle's relationship to it changed. It was not a flaw, but a feature, a reminder, a way for excess pressure to escape. Moss began to grow in the dampness around the crack, a tiny green life that valued the kettle not for its boiling, but for its gentle leak. Part 5. The cold stove and the memory of steam. Seasons passed. The stove saw less use. The kettle spent long periods cold, empty, and still. At first, this stillness felt like failure. I am not being a proper kettle. But in the long, cold quiet, the iron began to remember. It remembered the mountain. It remembered the slow, patient cold of the earth, which was not an absence of heat, but a different kind of wholeness. It felt its own solidity, its weight, the beautiful, simple fact of its iron nature. It realized the singing steam had never been its song. It was the song of water meeting fire. The kettle was just the space where that meeting occurred. Its true nature was not the temporary heat or the frantic song, but the enduring, silent iron that could witness both fire and ice without being fundamentally changed by either. One evening, it was placed on the shelf, not as a retired tool, but as an honored guest. It held dry lavender now, not water. Its spout pointed not toward a cup, but toward the starlight from the window. It was a kettle, yes, but it was also a vase, a sculpture, a relic of a different understanding. It was finally at home in its own form, free from the tyranny of its function. The hearth of the unlit fire. The keeper, in the starlit kitchen, tended the cold stove and the empty kettle, because he understood their deepest truth. The greatest teaching was not in the boiling, but in the capacity to boil, not in the steam, but in the stillness that makes steam noticeable. The kettle's worth was not in the tea it could make, but in its simple, steadfast being, an iron universe containing the possibility of waterfalls and quiet sips. Leo, in the velvet chair, felt the truth of this seep into him like warmth from the cat. The chorus of whispers in his mind, the you shoulds and what ifs, were just steam. They were not him. He was the kettle. The pressure of ambition, the heat of anger, the simmer of anxiety, they were just fires under a pot that was not his essence. He felt for the first time the cool, solid iron of his own presence beneath the churning water of his thoughts. He noticed the cracks, his vulnerabilities, his weariness, not as failures, but as portals where the pressure could escape, where the moss of self-compassion could grow. The need to be constantly on the boil to sing with productivity and purpose simply evaporated. It was enough to be. To be the vessel, resting on the cold stove of this quiet hour, holding the still water of his being under the peaceful, indifferent gaze of the stars. The keeper's final words were not spoken aloud, but seemed to form from the condensation on the window, words of frost in the starlight. So rest, Leo. You are not the boiling water. You are the kettle, strong and still. You are not the frantic steam. You are the space in the kitchen where the steam dissolves into air. Let each thought be a bubble. Let it rise and pop at the surface of your awareness. Let each worry be a source of heat. Feel it, and know it cannot change the nature of the iron. There is no tea to brew, no song you must sing. The fire is out, the water is still. You are not a tool for a purpose. You are a vessel of presence, resting on the hearth of eternity. The whispers were only echoes in an empty room. The room is you, and you are silent. The cat purrs, the starlight falls, the kettle dreams of mountains. Rest in the cold, in the quiet, in the simple, weighty truth of the iron. In the hour of the unstruck bell, in the hearth of the unlit fire, the blue starlight waxed and waned in a silent rhythm. The cast iron kettle sat in perfect, contented stillness. The keeper of the simmering quiet became a shadow within a shadow, and in his chair, Leo slept the sleep of the cold kettle, a deep, heavy, and profoundly quiet rest. The lid was still. No steam escaped, for there was no fire to create it. There was only the vessel, whole and complete, holding nothing but the deep, dark, peaceful silence of the ore from which it came, forever part of the sleeping mountain, forever at home in the cool, star-lit dark.